I want to say, though, in starting, that I can remember as a boy when I was about 9 or 10 years old, the little country Baptist church that I grew up in had 2 qualifications in the church constitution for pastors and deacons there at that little church that were in addition to the biblical qualifications for a pastor and deacon. And I remember this distinctly because when I was, like I say, 9 or 10 years old, there was a man who was a deacon in the church that one of these 2 issues came up about, and that was this part of the church constitution was read from the pulpit. I don't know who the man was. I was just a boy at the time. But the 2 qualifications to be a pastor or a deacon at that little country Southern Baptist church, wasn't even an independent Baptist church, were, number 1, you could not drink alcohol or give alcohol to anybody else. And that was an issue that came up because that particular deacon owned a little convenience store and he started selling alcohol. So they told him he couldn't be a deacon anymore or he had to get rid of the alcohol. He chose the alcohol over being a deacon, best I recall. The other thing, though, in the church constitution was that no pastor or deacon of the church could be a member of any secret society. As a 9 or 10-year-old boy, I didn't even know what a secret society was. And it wasn't until years later that I became acquainted with the Masons and a little bit about what they believe. And as time went along, I learned more about who they are and what they believe. I need to say as a disclaimer starting out, I am not a Mason, nor have I ever been a Mason. Somebody asked me this week, you really think you ought to be talking about what the Masons believe if you're not a Mason? And as I told them, well, I preach on hell too, but I've never been there either. And so as a Baptist preacher, my job is to tell the truth wherever it is, whatever it's about, whether I've been there or participated in it or not. And I'm thankful there are a lot of things that I'm supposed to preach about that I have not participated in. Amen? Amen. Yeah. So I am not a Mason, never have been a Mason. I have been associated with 4 people very close to me in my lifetime that were Masons. One of them died a Mason. 2 of them were Masons and left the Masons once they realized what it was all about. And the 4th one was given the opportunity to become a Mason, and then once he saw a little bit about it, he declined to go any further and did not officially become a Mason. So no, I have not been a Mason. I have had some very close people in my life who were or were associated with the Masons, however. But the material that I'm going to share with you tonight and next Sunday night has nothing to do with my opinion about anything. You're going to see and hear for yourself from the words of the Masons themselves about what they believe. And so at that, I'm going to move to our next slide here. This is part 1 that we're going to talk about tonight. The title for part 1 is The Secrets About Masons That Most People Want to Know. These are the things you've heard a little bit about and you probably know a little bit about that goes on. And so I'm going to do my very best to just disclose all their secrets that I can disclose to you. Get all of it out there so any interest that anybody might have had in being a Mason just because they wanted to find out what the secrets are, I'm going to give them all to you so you don't have to go join the Masons to find out their secrets and what they do there. We're going to talk about those handshakes, the passwords, all those kind of things. And I'm sure there are a lot of Masons that are not going to be happy with what we're doing because we're not only going to do it for those that are here tonight, we're going to put it online and anybody and everybody all over the world that wants to see it will be able to see it for themselves. I have, over the course of the last week, I've had a couple of people that knew we were going to be doing this particular topic tonight for our Bible study, and they asked me, out of, I think, genuine concern, aren't you worried about doing something like this because you might come under attack? Because Masons hold some very high positions in local, state, national, and international capacities. My answer to them is the same thing my answer always is as a preacher, and that is I serve a God who's a lot higher than anybody else is, and I only answer to Him. And so that's why I'm going to share with you what I'm going to share with you. I'm sharing it with you because, number one, as your pastor, I want to make sure that I'm doing my due diligence in protecting my flock so that my flock knows what the Masons are, what they believe, lest at some point you or some of your family members get drawn into the Masons or are thinking about joining the Masons. I want you to know up front who they are, what they believe beforehand, so that you can make an educated decision before you get caught up in something that you don't know what it is until it's too late. I also want to say, before I move to the next slide here, it is not my intention to be unkind or ugly to anybody that either is a Mason or has friends or relatives that might be Masons. My desire is to share the truth. The Bible says that the truth shall set you free. I'm going to share the truth. You can do with it as you will, and those that you share it with, they can do with it as they will also. Number one, most Masons will not appreciate you trying to share this information with them. So if you know some Masons and you take all this stuff you're going to learn over the next 2 weeks and you try to go to them and share it with them, number one, they're not supposed to reveal any of their secrets, so they're probably not going to admit that you're right about anything you share with them. But number two, they're not going to appreciate you trying to tell them that what they're doing is wrong. And that's just human nature. That's the way any of us are. Any of us, if somebody approaches us about something we're a part of or something we're doing, our immediate instinct is to say, listen, I don't want to listen to what you have to say. I don't agree with you. I'm not going to listen to it. So don't be surprised if you try to share this information with someone who is a Mason if they don't even want to listen to what you have to say. So you're going to have to be, as Jesus said, wise as serpents but harmless as doves as you try to discerningly share this information with them. Maybe it's best to do it in the form of asking them questions to try to get them to see the truth for themselves. Secondly of all, sharing this information will not make you popular, especially among the movers and shakers in your community. It is not how to win friends and influence people. Some of the most powerful people in government at every level are Masons. And so trying to pull the veil back, trying to open the door and shed light on the things we're going to talk about, it is not something that's going to make you any friends with the country club crowd. Number three, most Masons you know do not know everything you're about to learn. A large part of what we're going to cover, especially next week, are things that the average Mason that you might know, he probably does not even know what I'm going to tell you about. So don't be surprised if he acts like we don't believe that, Masons don't teach that, because most Masons don't even know what they believe and what Freemasonry is all about. Next one, number four. Every Mason you know knows some of what you're about to learn. While most Masons you know probably don't know everything you're going to hear in the next 2 weeks, all of the Masons you know some of what we're going to talk about. And all of the Masons that you know enough that if they're a Christian, they should know better than to be a part of it. Again, I'm not saying that to condemn anyone or to throw stones. It's simply a fact. You should not settle on your final answer until you've seen the evidence which will be presented. The Bible says, he that answereth a matter before he heareth it, it is folly and shame unto him. Proverbs 18:13. So I say that because I'm hoping that even though there are no Masons here tonight perhaps, that in the future some Masons will listen to this Bible study. And my hope is that they will hear all the evidence presented and then make their own decision, but not make a decision until they've seen it and heard it all for themselves. So what does the Bible say? 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, whether therefore you eat or drink or whatsoever you do, do all to the glory of God. I learned that verse at the Wilds Christian Camp up in Brevard, North Carolina when I was in 7th grade. And I've remembered that verse ever since. It's a good verse. You ought to memorize it if you don't know it. And then 1 Corinthians 10 verse 23 says, all things are lawful for me, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful for me, but all things edify not. That verse means that as a Christian, I might be free to do whatever I want to do, but that doesn't mean that everything I could do is what I ought to do. There are some things I could do, but it may not be best for me to do them. My purpose and greatest desire in this life should be to get glory for God through me and through my life. Everything else in this life should be secondary to pleasing and glorifying Him. There's nothing that is either equal nor more important than this. My number one goal ought to be well-pleasing in His sight. And if we make that the goal, the standard by which we judge whether we should or shouldn't do anything, we'll all be better off in our Christian walk. Here's the answer to that question. So then the issue should not be whether I can be a Freemason and still be saved, but instead whether being a Freemason hinders me from being what I can and should be for the Lord Jesus Christ. If being a Freemason in any way diminishes my service, my witness, or my devotion to Him, even one tiny bit, I must answer, no, I should not be a Freemason. By the way, that same principle applies to a lot of other things in life too. If anything we're doing in our Christian life diminishes our service, our witness, or our devotion to Him, we shouldn't do those things either. Okay, are you ready to begin our quest? Are you prepared to be honest with yourself and with God about this subject of the Masons? I've listed some reasons that men join the Masons. You say, well, preacher, you're not a Mason. You've never been a Mason. How do you know the reasons that some men join the Masons? Well, I know because I've known a lot of Masons over the years. Here are some of the reasons I've heard some of them give. Number one, my daddy was a Mason. So if their father or grandfather, uncle or brother was a Mason, they're more likely to be a Mason themselves if a family member has been. Number two, to learn how to become a better man. In fact, that's the motto of the Masons, is making good men better. Number three, to do good philanthropic deeds for their fellow man. Number four, I suspect this is the reason for a lot of them, to climb the social and business ladder in the community. That's the same reason they go to that big church down the road too, with the chandeliers and the ball fields and all that, because they're trying to climb that ladder. I didn't mention any names, Brother John. All right, number five. Some men join the Masons to learn the secret, mysterious knowledge so that they can gain some advantage in their business, their life, their family, or politics. Now, I'm going to tell you what all their mysterious knowledge is over the course of tonight and next Sunday. So you're going to know what it is. You don't need to join the Masons to know what those things are. I'm going to give you all of that, and I'll answer any questions you have after we're through with the 2 weeks too. Number six, to achieve salvation and spiritual success without going to church. I'm just going to be honest with you. I've known more than a few Masons that they were at the Masonic Lodge every time there was a lodge meeting. But those fellows, you'd be hard-pressed to find them every Sunday in their local church like they ought to be. Now, number seven, this might be it for a lot of them too, to get away and spend time with the boys. They just want to get away and spend time with other men. All right, so I have entitled this slide A Likely Response. A Mason that's hearing the things that we're going to present in this study will likely deny all of the things I'm going to tell you for one of two reasons. The first reason is he takes seriously his oaths to keep the rites and rituals of Freemasonry a secret. So he will go to great lengths to discredit both the message and the messenger in order to get others to believe that what is contained in this presentation is all lies, thus causing others to believe that there's no truth in it, and thus preserving the secrets of Masonry. And I'm going to tell you, it would not be unusual for you to present any of the information I'm going to share with you with a Mason and say, hey, is this true? If he's a good Mason, he's not supposed to tell you whether it's true or not. He's supposed to keep it a secret. And he's in trouble if he says, yes, that is true about the Mason. So if you ask them a question about whether some of what I'm presenting is true, the average Mason is not going to tell you yes or no. He's not supposed to. Or the other response you'll get is this. He genuinely does not yet know what he has gotten himself into with Freemasonry, and he's going to be as caught off guard by what he sees and hears in this presentation as everybody else is. Nobody, though, wishes to believe that he has been misled and duped into believing things that are not true. I mean, let's face it. If you found out that you were wrong in something you had believed for a long time, doesn't that make you feel a little bit stupid, embarrassed? I know when I learned some things about biblical cosmology that the Bible teaches that I should have known and believed a long time ago, I felt really dumb for not having just believed the Bible in the beginning. Well, that's the response you might get from a Mason who doesn't even realize yet what he's gotten himself into. He may even feel ashamed and embarrassed. The natural response for anyone in this situation is to be offended, be defensive, and to vehemently deny that these things are so, even if they are so. There's little hope for the man in the first case. He's already placed his allegiance higher than the church, family, country, and even the revealed Word of God. He's given his allegiance to Freemasonry above all those others. This is one of the despicable things about Freemasonry. It removes a man's allegiance from those who should have it and puts in their place Freemasonry. But that's one of the problems in our churches, in our government, and in the world today, in businesses today. Men who are Freemasons have given Masonic principles and doctrine a higher allegiance in their heart and mind than these other institutions and God that should have it. And that's why we're in the situation we are today. Who are Masons? Well, Masons are doctors, lawyers, mechanics, teachers, professors, deacons, and even some preachers. The average Mason would tell you that the Masons are a brotherhood designed to help good men become better men and to do philanthropic deeds to help others. An admirable goal. The average Mason believes Freemasonry is a good institution. He believes that he knows more about his craft. That's what Freemasons call Freemasonry. He believes he knows more about it than the uninitiated. That's me and you, those that are not Masons. And he will generally be offended and defensive if anyone speaks negatively about it. I have known Masons who would defend the Masonic Lodge faster than they would defend their church or their family or something else. So, a note to Christian Masons. During this presentation, you may want to leave and not return. If you mention it to another Master Mason, he will tell you not to go back to Pinnacle Baptist Church. He will tell you that what you experienced is a profane speaking of, quote, our venerated symbols and rituals, who doesn't know what he's talking about. And he would be talking about your preacher, by the way. If he's correct, though, there's nothing to lose by seeing for yourself, right? I'm not saying that to you. I'm saying that to any Mason that might be watching or listening later on. As a Christian, your greatest obligation is to be pleasing to the one who gave himself for you. To Christian Masons, I would also say 2 Corinthians 5:9 says, wherefore we labor, that whether present or absent, we may be accepted of Him. That is our goal. Our number one goal ought to be well-pleasing to God above all else. Masons are taught to desire, quote-unquote, light. So allow the light of the Word of God to dispel the darkness. John 8:32 says, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. As a Baptist preacher, especially an independent Baptist preacher, you won't be a bit surprised to hear me say, like I always say, that the final authority in all matters is to be the Word of God. What I think does not matter. What you think does not matter. What Mama and Daddy think does not matter. What the worshipful master of the local lodge thinks does not matter. But what does matter is what God thinks about anything. What God thinks is all that matters on the subject, for it is He who will judge every man one day, and it is by His word that we will all be judged. So what we're going to do is compare what Masonry says with what the Bible says, because that's the ruler, the yardstick by which we're all going to be measured one day. Acts 17:31 says, because He hath appointed a day in which He will judge the world in righteousness by that man whom He hath ordained, whereof He hath given assurance unto all men, in that He raised Him from the dead. The one who's going to be our judge one day is the one that God the Father raised from the dead, and that is Jesus Himself. Psalm 119:89 says, forever, O Lord, Thy word is settled in heaven. So whatever the Bible says, that's what it says. Revelation 20:12 says, I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books according to their works. This, of course, is the great white throne judgment. It's only for lost people, and it's only to determine what their judgment or degree of judgment is going to be. Now we're getting into the actual parts of Freemasonry. Masons begin their initiation into Freemasonry by becoming a member of a regular Blue Lodge. You want to keep note of the name Blue Lodge. That's what every Mason starts out in, even if he goes into one of the offshoots of Masonry later on. Every Mason starts out in the Blue Lodge. It's the first 3 degrees of Masonry. In the Blue Lodge, they may advance through 3 degrees. Number 1, the entered apprentice degree. Number 2, the fellowcraft degree. And number 3, the Master Mason degree. Upon completion of the Master Mason degree, though, a Mason may choose to join himself to an appendant body of Freemasonry, that is a branch off the Blue Lodge, to pursue advanced degrees. The 2 most notable systems in these United States are the York Rite and the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. The York Rite includes various independent orders within it, such as the Knights Templar and the Associated Order of Malta. The York Rite is more prevalent on the other side of the pond, over in England and the continent of Europe, than it is here in the States. The Scottish Rite is more prevalent here in the States. The Scottish Rite includes a total of 32 earned degrees, with a special 33rd degree which may be bestowed honorarily upon a 32nd degree initiate who has contributed significantly to the cause of Freemasonry. I'll give you an example. There are a lot of politicians, entertainers, well-known people that are honorarily receive the 33rd degree in Freemasonry, because just having their name associated with Freemasonry is good for Freemasonry. And so the 33rd degree is usually reserved for Freemasons that have contributed in a significant way, but they don't hesitate to throw it out there to big-name celebrities as well for the purposes of their own propaganda. Masonic lodges are open exclusively to men. But there are appendant Masonic organizations for women, such as the Order of the Eastern Star and others, the Rainbow Girls for daughters, and De Malay for boys. You may at some time or another have seen a building with a sign on it that says Order of the Eastern Star. Those are the wives of Masons who have their own Masonic organization. I know when I was in high school, I was still at that point in a Southern Baptist church, and I went to the annual convention of the Royal Ambassadors here in Georgia, down at Lake Tobesofkee in Macon, where we held our annual jamboree down there. Royal Ambassadors were kind of like Boy Scouts for teenage boys in the Southern Baptist churches at the time. And I was supposed to be, I had won the National Mission Speak Out contest to represent the state of Georgia. So I was supposed to go on stage there at the Jamboree and present my 5-minute speech on missions to all the other young men that were there. And I was back behind the curtain there on the stage waiting to go out and give my 5-minute speech on missions. And there was another Southern Baptist boy back there who was one of the quote-unquote officers and the royal ambassadors that year. And he was trying to recruit me to join the DMLA while I was there to present my missions presentation. I didn't know what DMLA was at the time. I didn't know what the Masons were at the time as far as that goes. I knew of them but didn't know what they believed. But they are actively recruiting, and they actively get their children involved. They actively get their wives involved. And so this is the organization of Freemasonry. Then there are clandestine lodges. All lodges that are formed without the proper authority from the Grand Lodge of their state are deemed to be clandestine and therefore unlawful to all other Masons. Now, in every state, the Grand Lodge is the parent organization, and all the local lodges in the state of Georgia are under the Grand Lodge of Georgia, for example. This means that Masons are not to interact with such lodges nor treat their members as fellow Masons upon penalty of being expunged from the Masons themselves. And until the 1990s, all Negro lodges around the country were purporting to be Masonic lodges were considered clandestine in these United States. That is, the other Masons didn't recognize them as Masons. Since that late date, however, certain of the Prince Hall lodges, which are the black lodges, have been accepted by the Grand Lodges as legitimate. This is one of the things that until the 90s, Masons were still seen by the secular world as being exclusive and inappropriate because they did not allow anyone from the black lodges to be a member. Now here we're beginning to get into some of the code words, some of the verbiage that you'll hear among Masons when they're trying to speak to each other or identify one another, even out in public. Sitting in the east, what does that mean? The position in the lodge room where the worshipful master sits, he's the head of the local lodge, is also known as the Oriental chair. The word Orient, by the way, means Eastern. Lodges are symbolically situated east and west. If you know of any Masonic lodges in the area, if you'll think about where they are in your mind right now, they probably are designed, they've been built on an east-west axis. And whoever the worshipful master is, when they're in their lodge room there, he's going to sit in the far east end of the building in his big chair at the end of the room. When a Mason suspects that another man may be a Mason out in public somewhere, and he wishes to ask him if he's a Mason without doing so directly, he may ask such questions as, "Have you ever been to the East?" Or, "Are you a traveling man?" I know, might seem silly, but if you ever have a man come up to you, men, and he asks you one of these questions, he's asking, "Are you a Mason?" He's trying to let you know he's a Mason and find out if you're a Mason without asking you, "Are you a Mason?" and giving himself away in case you're not. I remember one time I was preaching at a church that I was not a member of. It was a fairly well-sized church, and I was well received, but after the service was over, a gentleman came up to me as folks were leaving the church, and he came up and shook my hand. He said, "Are you a traveling man?" And at that point, I was a young man, Brother John. I was in my 20s, and I said, "Well, I've been out to Yellowstone, and I've been to such place." He just kind of shook his head and turned and walked off. He knew that I didn't know what he was saying, and at that time, I didn't realize he was trying to find out if I was a Mason. I thought it was an odd, bizarre question, but I was just answering it. I was a naive young man. But those are the questions they use, or some of the questions they use, to try to identify each other. You'll see some more coming up. Again, when a Mason meets another man that he believes may be a brother Mason and wishes to inquire without asking the question directly, he may use some other question that includes one or more Masonic catchphrases or words such as, "Have you seen my dog Hiram?" Now, who names their dog Hiram? But the name Hiram is very significant in the mythology associated with Freemasonry. So just throwing that name out there, he's trying to find out if you picked up on the buzzword. And then here's another one. Have you seen my dog with a blue collar? Well, I guess dogs wear blue collars. In fact, I used to have a Siberian Husky with solid white, and I bought him a blue collar. That's not what they're talking about. They're trying to find out, are you from the Blue Lodge, like I'm from the Blue Lodge? It's a catchphrase that they know any Mason is going to pick up on right away. And then here's another one. How old is your grandmother or your mother? Now, what does how old your mother or grandmother is have to do with finding out if somebody's a Mason? What they're asking is, what's the lodge number of the lodge you belong to? I'm a member of lodge number 142. That would be my answer for how old my grandmother or my mother is. The average person will think these questions are odd, but will have no clue why he's being asked such a silly question, just like I did that day at that church when that fella asked me if I was a traveling man. A fellow Mason, however, will immediately pick up on the clue and give some answer which indicates that he's a fellow Mason himself. Here's the question that somebody was asking me before we got started tonight. There are two different kinds of Masons, so let me clear that up before we go any further. By the way, I noticed on our Facebook page when we posted about tonight's Bible study and the topic, somebody that's not from our church, I don't have a clue who they are, I saw they had asked the question, are you talking about brick Masons? That's not what we're talking about, so let's see the difference. Operative and speculative Freemasonry. Operative Masonry refers to the actual stonemasons of old who designed and built structures out of stone, brick, and mortar. And by the way, there's still those kind of Masons around today. That one that's been working on that house over there with the crew, he's done a real fine job on those columns over there made out of brick. It looks super. That's a brick Mason. That's a stone Mason. That's not the kind of Masons we're talking about in this Bible study. As they learned their craft, though, each Mason passed through 3 levels of apprentice, journeyman, and master Mason. The Masons joined together later on to form guilds or lodges during the late Middle Ages. Then there's speculative Masonry. That's what we're talking about tonight. Refers to men who are not literally stonemasons, but have adopted the principles of operative Masons, ostensibly in order to build character instead of building stone edifices. So they would say, we've taken the principles of a stonemason and we're using those same principles, and instead of building buildings, we're building better men. That's what they would say. These are the lodges of Freemasonry in existence today, and they still utilize many of the symbols of operative Masonry, such as the apron, the square, and the compass, to illustrate their teachings. Over on the left, you see pictures of actual stonemasons doing their work building buildings. On the right, you see speculative Masons, Freemasonry today, and they've got all the symbology there, but none of them ever laid a brick a day in their lives. So what's a tiled lodge? We all know what a Masonic lodge is. You've seen them riding up and down the roads. What does it mean to be a tiled lodge? Sometimes seen with the archaic spelling of tiled with a Y, a tiled lodge is one which is secure and free of interlopers and eavesdroppers who are profane and uninitiated to Masonry. In other words, they don't want folks like you and I that aren't Masons getting in their meetings and hearing what goes on in there. So they have a man who stands at the door who's called the tiler. As a secret society, Masonry seeks to carefully guard its secrets and thus prohibits non-Masons from being present within the lodge whenever lodge business is being conducted. Now, if it's not lodge business being conducted, they sometimes will have social gatherings, and their wives and children are welcome. They're even welcome to bring guests, bring visitors. There are some Masonic lodges that will even invite the Boy Scouts to hold their meetings there and things like that, but not when a Masonic meeting is going on. If a Masonic meeting is going on and business is being conducted and people being initiated with their rites and rituals, they have a man standing at the door to make sure nobody gets in the door that doesn't know the passwords. He's the tiler. He's the Mason commissioned by the local lodge to check the qualifications of anybody wishing to enter the lodge. He maintains a list of all members and visiting Masons present for any meeting, and he is supposed to ensure that all Masons wear their mandatory aprons when inside the lodge. So men, if your wife makes you wear an apron at home, that's not what we're talking about here. This is the Masonic apron, and you see those pictured down below. All 3 degrees of the Blue Lodge, the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry, are all centered around a story that is recounted and acted out during the initiation into each of the 3 degrees. It is the story, the made-up story, of Hiram Abiff. Now, the story actually is loosely related to an actual man who's actually mentioned in the Bible. Hiram was the king of Tyre at the time that David was gathering the materials to build the temple, and then when he died, Solomon had the temple in Jerusalem built. King Hiram sent the building materials at the request of David and Solomon to be used in the construction of the first temple. And a man named Hiram, whether it was King Hiram or another Hiram that he sent, Hiram was very instrumental in construction of many of the things inside Solomon's temple. Even though he wasn't a Jew, he was a master craftsman, and he was employed by King Solomon to complete some of the things inside the original temple there in Jerusalem, including especially 2 magnificent columns that are significant in Freemason mythology too. Central to the theme of the 3 degrees of the Blue Lodge is the myth of the death and resurrection of Hiram Abiff, the king of Tyre, who the Bible says provided building materials and workers to help with the construction of Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. Additionally, he is credited by Masons with being the master mason in charge of the actual construction of the temple itself because of the work he oversaw recorded in Scripture, including 2 great pillars which bear the names of Jachin and Boaz. The myth of his resurrection is not only retold during the initiations into the 3 degrees of the Blue Lodge, but it is acted out as part of the rituals. The emphasis is not upon the death, the burial, and resurrection of Jesus, but upon the death, burial, and resurrection of this ecumenical secular figure, King Hiram of the city of Tyre. Upon his completion of the 3rd degree in the Blue Lodge, the initiate is said to be raised as a master mason, just as Hiram is said to have been raised from the dead by the Masons at the building of King Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. Now, there was a man named Hiram. He did help with the building of the temple. He was not killed, buried, and rose from the dead, as Freemasonry says. But I have heard more than one Mason tell me over the years, everything that we talk about is based on the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. No, it's not. It's not based on the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, for Jesus' resurrection is not discussed. It is the death, burial, and resurrection of a pagan, secular figure, King Hiram of Tyre. In the 3rd degree. In the 3 degrees of the Blue Lodge, the Mason's progress is referred to in 3 different stages by these terms. Initiated means he has passed the 1st degree as an entered apprentice. Passed means he has passed the 2nd degree as a fellow craftsman. Raised means that he has passed the 3rd degree and is now a master mason. After he has been raised and is a master mason, he has completed the 3 degrees of the Blue Lodge. That's all he can do in the Blue Lodge. That's as far as he can go. If he wants to go further in Masonry, Freemasonry, he has to choose one of those appendant bodies for the advanced degrees. He can choose the York Rite or the Scottish Rite. But he can't go any further just in the Blue Lodge. He can't go any farther than being a master mason. Here they are. Jake, here's what you were waiting for. No. The secret handshakes. The secret handshakes. This is one of the ways that Masons have of identifying each other when they're out in public, and not only identifying each other, but letting each other know how far along in the Blue Lodge they are. The entered apprentice handshake is the same as a regular handshake, except the thumb of the man who is a first-degree Mason, he will place it on the first knuckle of the guy whose hand he's shaking. Now, you can tell just by the picture, that's not a normal-looking handshake. It's a little bit awkward, and he does that, though, to place his thumb intentionally on that first knuckle. The average person's going to just think, hey, this guy's weird, he doesn't know how to shake hands. But to another Mason, he immediately knows, hey, he's telling me he's an entered apprentice. Now I'm going to return the handshake, and if I am a fellow craft, the second degree, I'm going to place my thumb on his second knuckle, and that lets him know I'm a degree ahead of him. If I'm a master Mason, I'm going to make it's going to be a really awkward handshake, but I'm going to stretch my thumb out and put my thumb on his third knuckle, meaning I'm a Mason of the third degree. Now, because this handshake looks very awkward out in public, a lot of times when Masons are shaking hands with each other like this and they want to kind of camouflage it so other people looking around don't say, hey, that's odd looking. When they're shaking hands with somebody, they'll cover their hands like this while they're shaking hands so everybody else doesn't see how encumbersome it is what they're trying to do. But those are the secret handshakes. That's how they identify one another and what degree they are out in public without having to say anything. The lion's paw. This is another handshake. It's a grip. Also known as the strong grip of the Master Mason or the lion's paw. The grip of a Master Mason is used by the worshipful Master of the Lodge to raise a newly initiated Master Mason from quote-unquote death to life, literally raising him to his feet at the end of his initiation. He'll be on his knees, by the way, before he's raised. At this time, the initiate, kneeling at the Lodge's altar of Freemasonry, and yes, there's an altar, is raised to his new life as a Master Mason by the, quote, strong grip of the lion's paw. Now, that's an unusual looking handshake, to be sure. Kind of looks like something that Mort from Orc would do. But when the Master Mason when a fellow's being initiated as a Master Mason, he's on his knees. He's gone through the whole ritual now. The last step of the process there is the worshipful master of that lodge, standing in front of him, will reach down and take him by the hand with the strong grip of the lion's paw and pick him up to his feet. And he is now raised from death unto life as a Master Mason. I don't have time to go into their mythology behind the lion's paw, and it's related to the story of the resurrection of Hiram Abiff, and they claim it's related to Jesus being the lion of the tribe of Judah. But I'm going to tell you, for all of that they want to tie into biblical analogies with Jesus, there are other analogies from pagan religions that tie much more closely to this initiation process than anything related to Jesus. This is them attempting to tie it to Jesus is all made up. There are some other secret signs that the Masons use. Each of the first 3 degrees of Masonry has a sign associated with it, and you can see up there on the board, or you can watch me. I'm going to show you what they are. The first one is taking your hand with your thumb from one ear and drawing it in a line to the other ear. It is symbolic of the oath that they take when they are initiated as a first-degree Mason, which says, if I reveal any of the secrets of a Mason, may my throat be cut from ear to ear. So that's one of the signs of a first-degree Mason. The sign of the second-degree Mason is looking like you're grabbing your heart and ripping it out. Because, again, in keeping with the oath that's taken by a second-degree Mason, it's that if I reveal the secrets of Masonry or I fail to keep any of my obligations as a Mason, may my heart be ripped from my breast, and there's some other things I'll share with you later. And then the last one is the sign of a Master Mason, the third-degree Mason, and that is this. And what it is symbolic of is his vow that if he does not perform his obligations as a Master Mason like he has vowed to do, may he be sawn asunder, his bowels taken out, and some other things done to them that we'll talk about at a later time. The hidden hand of Freemasonry. How many of you have ever seen pictures of famous people with one hand stuck inside their coat? We all have, right? I mean, people from history all the way back hundreds of years in the same pose. Have you ever wondered, why are all these famous people striking the same pose? Is it just because it looks noble? Well, there's more to it than that. Once advanced to the rank of Master Mason, a Mason earns the right and obligation to show his allegiance to the cause of Freemasonry by striking a pose with, quote, the hidden hand of Freemasonry on appropriate occasions. This is a signal to all other Master Masons that he is led by the high calling of Masonry. That is, he has no higher allegiance than he does to Masonry. All other allegiances are secondary to this one. The hidden hand is an occultic sign in and of itself. The word occult or occultic means hidden. You see on the far left there is Karl Marx, the father of communism, Napoleon Bonaparte, my least favorite of all of them, William Tecumseh Sherman, and thank you for the boos, and then Joseph Stalin. They all are bad guys, but they're also all Freemasons as well. Secret words. So they got secret handshakes, secret signs, and secret words. It almost reminds me of the Little Rascals with their gang that they had, and the secret password they had to get into the clubhouse. Just as there are secret handshakes for the Mason in each degree, and as he passes from one degree to the next, so too are there secret passwords that accompany each of those handshakes. An initiate must know both the handshake and the accompanying password in order to be accepted by fellow Masons in his or other lodges. If a Mason were to visit another lodge while he's on vacation or just traveling, and he wants to go into their meetings, if he's a Master Mason, he would be allowed to go into some other lodge, even if he's not a member of that lodge, provided he knows the right handshake and the password. The password for an accepted apprentice is Boaz. The password for fellow craft is Shibboleth. The fellow craft, once he's graduated, Jockin. The Master Mason pass is Tubal-Cain, and the Master Mason password itself is Mahabon. We'll talk more about that later too. All of those are names, by the way, from the Bible, but they are names that have been misappropriated and given occultic meanings that are not related to them from the Bible. They've taken biblical terms and given them pagan meanings. It is no different than what Roman Catholicism has done with taking the names of Bible people and beliefs and attributing them to pagan doctrines and pagan lore. No different at all. Here's the Masonic greeting. Upon being raised, quote unquote, from the dead during his initiation as a Master Mason, the initiate is promptly given the 5 points of fellowship by the worshipful master of the lodge or his designee, who raises the initiate with the strong grip of the lion's paw, and then he embraces him in the Masonic greeting. The 5 points of fellowship are foot to foot, knee to knee, chest to chest, hand to back, and mouth to ear as he whispers, Mahabon. The initiate vows to never repeat the password except to a fellow Mason and only in a low voice when greeting his fellow Mason with the 5 points of fellowship. They're not supposed to do this for everybody else to see and hear what's going on, But it is one of the ways they identify themselves, even out in public, as long as they do it quietly. Here's the Masonic distress signal. By the way, Masons are required to come to the rescue of a fellow Mason in distress. We'll talk more about that later too. The vows taken by Masons obligate them to come to the aid of any brother Mason who is in peril and asks for help. The Master Mason's vow expresses the obligation to respond to the universal Masonic distress signal thusly: I furthermore promise and swear that I will not give the grand hailing sign of distress except it be in cases of the most imminent danger or suffering in the cause of innocence and virtue. If I've been unduly charged with something, accused of something, in other words, or in a just and lawfully constituted lodge of Master Masons, or in a lodge for instruction, and when I see or hear it given by a worthy brother in distress, I will fly to the relief of him which gives it, if there be a greater probability of saving his life than losing my own. What this means is that if you're a Master Mason, that is 3rd degree or higher, you're making the commitment that if you see another Mason giving the distress signal and you believe he's innocent, or he's been unjustly accused of whatever it is, or he's in danger, you're required to come to his rescue no matter what else is going on, no matter what your other obligations are. Your number one obligation is to go rescue him out of whatever trouble he's in. The grand hailing distress signal is pictured here. I'm going to do it for you. Here's the signal. It's the two hands down by the side and doing this 3 times. This is the grand hailing sign of distress. But if you can't do that in a public setting without it being noticeably awkward, there's another way you can give the sign of distress verbally. In the event that a Mason is unable to give the signal without betraying it to others, he may instead utter the question loudly enough for other nearby Masons to hear it and come to his aid by saying, "O Lord my God, is there no help for the widow's son?" Now, the widow's son, again, relates back to the story of Hiram Abiff, who was murdered and then resurrected from the dead in Masonic mythology. But if you ever hear somebody say something about, "Oh Lord my God, is there no help for the widow's son?" It sounds crazy, sounds odd, sounds strange, but he's letting any other Masons that might be in the room know, "Hey, I'm a Mason and I'm in trouble. Some of you better come get me out of trouble." That's what he's letting them know. In plain sight. Just as with the hidden hand of Freemasonry, the hand inside the coat, Masons have other hand signals that they use frequently right out in plain sight. And you see them all the time, by the way, in pop culture. These signals can be seen every day in magazines, movies, and television shows. To the average person, these signals mean nothing more than fad gestures. But to the initiated, they identify each other as fellow keepers of the secrets. Here's one of them right here. One of the more common hands, by the way, anybody know who that is? Charles Darwin, father of evolution. One of the more common hand signals used in plain sight is a finger to the lips, the sign of the vow of silence. That is not to reveal any of the secrets of the initiated. That is the vow to keep the secrets of their secret societies, not just Freemasonry, but any of the secret societies. This communicates to all other members of all other secret societies that he, as an individual, is a member of, quote, the club. He's in the club. He or she is proclaiming that he is faithful to his vow to keep the secrets of the mystery, that he is a loyal initiate of whatever secret society he is. It not only identifies his membership in the club, but also reiterates his fidelity to the cause of the secret fraternities and the mysteries they represent. You might not have ever seen this picture of Charles Darwin before with his finger to his lips, but I bet you've seen some pictures in newspapers, magazines, and television of lots of other celebrities, and political figures making the same gesture. Here are just a few of them. This is making the gesture of the all-seeing eye. It is another Masonic reference. The all-seeing eye of Horus, we talked about that when we did our series on Mystery Babylon over a year ago. From the Egyptian mystery religions. This hand signal symbolizes the belief in the third eye. That's the same thing the Hindus represent by that dot on their forehead. That there's a third eye, that they are enlightened beyond the average person. The belief that the illuminated have had a special part of their understanding enlightened that separates them from the profane, the initiated, us, in other words. Here are some other examples of people throwing up signs with the all-seeing eye of Horus. It might be displayed by simply doing this or this, bringing emphasis to the one eye, or it could be by covering up one eye so that there's only one eye exposed. Both of them are ways of bringing attention to the all-seeing eye of Horus. And you see lots of different ways that they do this in almost sneaky ways, but they're still getting their message across because anybody who's in the club knows what it means. Now you know what it means. Here's some others, and we could go on for 2 hours or better. We won't do that. The pineal gland in the brain, in the center of the brain there. You see a side cut of the pineal gland, and you see it looks identical to the Egyptian drawing of the Eye of Horus. We talked about this when we did our series on Mystery Babylon previously too. Don't have time to go through all that tonight. But the pineal gland in the brain looks like the Egyptian Eye of Horus. That's not a coincidence when a cross-section of the brain is viewed. It is this part of the brain that the occult and secret societies claim opens like a lotus flower on the inside of your brain, or like a lotus flower or a mature pine cone when the individual becomes truly enlightened. The New Age movement, Buddhism, Hinduism, all of the mystery religions use pine cones, the lotus flower, to symbolize the doctrine of being enlightened. And who do they think the enlightenment comes from? The serpent. That's part of the mythology too. We don't have time to go into tonight. That's why in Vatican City you see lots of big pine cones. It's because it's all paganism. It's all pagan mystery religions. There is Angkor Wat in Southeast Asia. Other places too. The ancient Babylonians, the Assyrians, today's Hindus, Buddhists, and Roman Catholics all use these same symbols that are the same symbols used in Freemasonry as well. Here are some of the other symbols of Freemasonry. If I had the time tonight, I could tell you how every one of those is associated with the ancient worship at the Tower of Babel and Mystery Babylon from ancient times, which is coming full circle and is right now everywhere around us in pop culture. But I don't have time to do that tonight. So what do Masons believe about Freemasonry? All right, I'm coming to a close tonight. What do the Masons themselves believe about their organization? The average Mason believes the following. Number one, it's an honorable institution. Number two, he believes it's not at odds with being a Christian. Number three, he believes it does not conflict with Scripture. Number four, he believes it does not require a Christian to compromise. Number five, he believes it presents truth to initiates and not lies. Are these things true? You're about to see for yourself. I want to give this challenge before we close tonight. You may not be a Mason here tonight, but any Mason that's watching this or listening to it, before you go any further, my challenge is this. If you're a Mason listening to this presentation, here's the challenge. Ask some of the older Masons in the lodge, or go online and ask some, to name some of the most respected authorities in Freemasonry on the symbols and meaning of the degrees of the craft. ask some of the older Masons, who do I read in our organization to find out what all our stuff means? Compare the list of respected authorities that they will give you by name to those that we're going to quote throughout the rest of this presentation. In so doing, you will realize that we have not chosen obscure sources that nobody's ever heard of, but rather the same respected names that are respected within Freemasonry in order to present an accurate picture of the craft of Freemasonry. We haven't gotten to the big stuff yet, the really big stuff. All of the sources that are going to be, material is going to be presented from for the rest of this presentation, all come from the most authoritative sources of Freemasonry. And Freemasonry is like the Baptist Church. There's 1,000 different writers you could find on Freemasonry and the symbols and origins. But these are the most trusted, most respected authorities within Freemasonry themselves. If you went to any one of the lodges within a 50-mile radius of here and you asked for a list of the top 5 major authorities in writing on Freemasonry and our symbols and our rituals, the names that you would get, I think, would almost to a man match up with the ones that we're going to see in this presentation. There are numerous Masons who have written about the beliefs and rituals of the order. But in modern times, there are only a handful of men who are accepted as the authorities by fellow Masons on such matters. And among these, we shall examine the words of these well-known Masons who have written extensively on the history, rituals, and symbols of Freemasonry. Albert Mackey, Albert Pike, Manly P. Hall, Henry Wilson Coyle, and if we wanted to, we could add a few other names to that. I'm actually going to add probably 1 or 2 others as we go through. Yes, sir. The first one that I'll mention is Albert Mackey. I'm not going to take time to go into a lot of his history, but I want you to know that he was a very prominent Mason. He is a very influential Mason because of the writings that he did, even though it was in the 19th century. As you see, he was born in my favorite southern city, and that is Charleston, South Carolina. His father was extremely intelligent and authored the most comprehensive, can you see? Mind your way? The most comprehensive mathematic textbook available in America at the time. That was his father. Albert Mackey himself became a medical doctor in 1832, but his passion was in the area of Freemasonry. And he quit the medical field after only 12 years to pursue a career in writing about Freemasonry. Now, doctor is a pretty lofty title. It's a pretty grandeur profession, even in the 19th century, but he quit his medical practice to become a full-time author because he was passionate about Masonry, Freemasonry. And his deep dive into the occult was focused primarily on the Jewish Talmud and Kabbalism, or Kabbalism. He wrote extensively on the original meanings behind the shrouded symbolism of Freemasonry and was involved at the highest levels in Scottish Rite Freemasonry, which is the largest branch of Freemasonry in the South. He continued to live in Charleston and was a member of the Grand Lodge of South Carolina. His writings are still considered the most comprehensive encyclopedia in print today, which explain the hidden meaning and the origin of Masonic symbols and rituals. During the War for Southern Independence, he was a Union sympathizer and traitor to his home state and to the South. Consequently, he was allowed to have a leading role in the Reconstruction government that was forced on South Carolina after the war by the federal government. So if I needed another reason to not like Albert Mackey, there it is. He was a traitor to the South. Albert Pike. Albert Pike was also... he's also a relic of the 19th century, but if you went around the Freemason lodges and asked for the name of the most prominent writer in Freemasonry that is revered today, this is the man that would be named. Albert Pike was born in Boston, Massachusetts. He was very intelligent. He was accepted into Harvard, but when he couldn't afford the first 2 years' tuition, he declined to attend, became self-educated, and he later moved out west. He worked as a school teacher, then as a trader, trapper, and hunter, eventually teaching himself law and becoming an attorney and a judge. So he obviously was a very intelligent man. He taught himself law and passed the bar. Politically, Pike joined the Know-Nothing anti-Catholic party, so there's something he and I would have had in common. He joined the anti-Catholic party but left it when the national platform failed to support slavery. So he was from Boston, Massachusetts, but he was very Southern sympathetic. So we could say that's a good thing about him. He was an ardent believer that the South should not allow free blacks to live among whites. He chose to support the Confederacy in spite of being born in Massachusetts. Because of his good relations with the various Indian tribes before the war out west, Pike was commissioned as a brigadier general in the Confederate Army and was given command of several Native American units of Indian cavalry. Before, during, and after the war, Pike focused much of his energy on developing the Freemasonry in America as the sovereign grand commander of the southern jurisdiction of Scottish Rite Freemasonry. He was the highest you could go in Freemasonry at the time. He was elected to this position in 1859 and continued until his death in 1891. His book, Morals and Dogma, published in 1871, developed the rituals for all 32 earned degrees in Scottish Rite Freemasonry and is still used for that purpose today. His explanations and descriptions for the rituals in each degree are taken heavily from his study on the ancient mystery religions associated with Babylon, Egypt, Assyria, and the Indo-Aryans. Pike is generally recognized as the most prominent figure in American Freemasonry, even to this day, and consequently he is the only Confederate general to have had a statue erected to his memory in Washington, D.C., the capital of the enemy of the Confederacy. I don't know if you know this or not, he at least up until the movement started a couple of summers ago to tear down all the monuments, he was the only Confederate to have a statue in Washington, D.C. Here's the next one, Manly P. Hall. Now, I don't know about you. To me, he looks like Houdini, the pictures I used to see in the old black and white movies of Houdini. But this is Manly P. Hall. Manly Palmer Hall was a Canadian author, lecturer, astrologer, mystic, and Freemason. Over his 70-year career, he gave thousands of lectures and published over 150 volumes, of which the best known is entitled The Secret Teachings of All Ages, published in 1928. In 1934, he founded the Philosophical Research Society in Los Angeles. Hall never knew his father, but was heavily influenced by his mother, who was a member of a Rosicrucian society. If you don't know who the Rosicrucians are, we'll talk about that another time. It's another secret society. But while living with her in California in the early 1900s, he became obsessed with mysticism, the occult, and the origins of secret societies. He became well known as a lecturer, an author, and mystic, speaking on such topics as reincarnation and theosophy. We'll maybe talk a little more about theosophy a little later on. Helena Blavatsky was the founder of theosophy in Germany in the late 1800s. It's an occultic secret society, and it, by the way, as a note to all of my flock here who know why we use the King James Bible, theosophy and Helena Blavatsky heavily influenced Westcott and Hort, the two men who put together the Revised Standard Version in 1881, specifically to attack and undermine your King James Bible, by the way. His books, The Lost Keys of Freemasonry, wait a minute, I skipped part of that. Like Mackey and Pike before him, Hall emphasized the origins of the philosophies behind Freemasonry and pointed to the mystery religions of ancient Babylon and Egypt, primarily in his own studies. His books, The Lost Keys of Freemasonry and The Secret Teachings of All Things from the 20s, are the most well-known and influential of all his writings, especially among Freemasons, Illuminists, and other practitioners of the occult. He created the Philosophical Research Society in L.A. in 1934 to promote occultism, hermeticism, alchemy, and metaphysics. Although associated with the Masonic Research Group prior to becoming a Mason, himself, he was initiated into Freemasonry in San Francisco in 1954, significantly after he had already authored his books, and eventually rose through all 32 earned degrees of Scottish Rite Freemasonry before having the 33rd degree conferred upon him in 1973. So here we have a man that was born in 1901, and his career in Freemasonry literally stretched all the way up until the late 1900s. He's considered the most influential of modern Masonic authors, and his writings are also the most open about the occultic origins of Masonic philosophy. When you see some of the quotes you're going to see and hear tonight from him, he makes no apologies for the fact that the meanings behind the rituals and the symbols are intentionally occultic. Then here's Henry Wilson Cole, and I have to tell you, it was not easy to find information about this particular individual, but here's what I got. He was born in 1885, died in 1974. He was born in Texas and graduated from the University of Denver College of Law in 1914. He was an active Mason, serving as the past master of the Riverside Masonic Lodge, and then the past high priest of the Riverside chapter in Riverside, California. He also served in numerous leadership roles in the Grand Lodge of California, including serving on its History Publication Committee at the time of his death at the age of 89. Additionally, he was a member of the Long Beach Scottish Rite Bodies, an honorary 33rd degree Mason in the Scottish Rite, and a member of the Al Malika Shrine Temple of Los Angeles. So he was a Shriner as well as a Mason. Cole immersed himself in the origins and meanings of Masonic rituals and philosophy. He wrote significant work regarding such things connected to Freemasonry as ancient paganism, Rosicrucianism, Catholicism, and Mormonism, which we'll come back to shortly too. Among his more well-known volumes published are the Outlines of Freemasonry, A Comprehensive View of Freemasonry, and his most well-known work, Cole's Masonic Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. Lodges across America and around the world still rely upon Cole's research and writings for the explanations of their rites today. So what I've done is I have given you now the biographies in condensed form of 4 of the men from whom I will be quoting in the rest of this presentation. Those 4 men and their words make up the majority of what I'm going to cite as Masonic authorities. I've specifically chosen them because they're the ones that the Masons themselves cite as the most authentic and authoritative sources in their symbols, their rituals, and their history. So I'm not trying to just pull out some little-known writers of Freemasonry and try to say all of Freemasonry believes this because this one guy says this. Now, these are the leaders of Freemasonry. These are the recognized authorities by the Masons themselves. So now let's get into the good stuff. The symbolism of Freemasonry. Masons, from the day they enter Freemasonry, are presented with numerous symbols and rituals which, they are told, represent different enlightened truths which are hidden from the common man, but revealed to illuminated initiates of Freemasonry. After all, that's why men join the Freemasons, is to find out the secrets, the special knowledge about a wide variety of things in life that the average person supposedly doesn't know. It is this collection of hidden truths, quote unquote, that Masons are told unlocks within them the potential to be better men than the uninitiated who do not possess this body of occultic knowledge. And the word occultic, as we talked about last week, the word literally just means hidden, but we know there are some other nuances to the meaning of that word. What the average Mason does not know is that at every level of his progression through the ranks of Freemasonry, he is lied to by those or his superiors in the order. At each level, he is told the truths, quote unquote, about the meanings behind Masonic symbols, rituals, and teachings, only to find out later that he was lied to previously because he was not yet ready to accept the real, quote-unquote truth about their hidden meaning. Hence, he is lied to over and over again as he progresses through the degrees. Only those in the higher degrees know this secret, and they revel in the fact. That is, only those in the higher degrees know that Masons are intentionally lied to at the lower degrees by those that are the ones leading them through their progression in the degrees. Now, this is a quote from Albert Pike in his book Morals and Dogma, which is the Bible of Freemasonry for most Masons.
All right, what I have here is a Morals and Dogma, the real thing, not some photocopied thing off the internet. Let's see. Morals and Dogma. Ancient and accepted right. Accepted by who? Bunch of fools. So anyway, we got that double-headed full bird on there. Open this old thing up here. I've had this for, I don't know, 10, 13 years now. Got it off the eBay. But, see, it's a 1920 printing of this thing. And it says, entered according to the Act of Congress in the year 1871 by Albert Pike in the office of the Librarian of Congress at Washington. Entered according to the Act of Congress in the year 1905 by the Supreme Council of the Southern Jurisdiction, AASR, USA, in the office of the Librarian of Congress at Washington. And here in that filthy book, like the man said on page 321, I got something underlined from way back when. The apocalypse is, to those who receive the 19th degree, the apotheosis of that sublime faith which aspires to God alone and despises all the pomps and works of Lucifer. Lucifer, the light bearer, strange and mysterious name to give to the spirit of darkness, and capital S and capital D. Lucifer, the son of the morning, is it he who bears the light, and with its splendors intolerable blinds feeble, sensual, and selfish souls? Doubt it not. Words of a fool that's in hell right now. Weeping and gnashing his teeth, the Bible says. Sorry, my camera doesn't have great focus on it. Here, I'll take a picture. Like the man said, this is like the Mason Bible, basically, for them. This is what is accepted by them as words of inspiration or something or another. But when dealing with them, this is the only reason I've kept this book. I've burned a lot of my other Mason books and filth, but I kept this one because if I actually talk to a Mason in person, I can whip this out and show them a couple of things on here and tell them, well, if you think it's Christian, you don't actually even understand what you're involved in. Because maybe some of them are like that, but look, if you just obey Jesus and not swear any oaths at all, you'd be saved from even having to look any further into this, huh? Tell them, Biscuit, say Masonry's wicked. People need to believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and not on filthy garbage like this right here.
He said, the blue degrees are but the outer or portico of the temple. Part of the symbols are displayed there to the initiate, but he is intentionally misled by false interpretations. He's talking about one of their own when he's first being initiated. It is not intended that he shall understand them, but it is intended that he shall imagine that he understands them. So in other words, he's admitting we lie to them about what our symbols mean, but he doesn't know that. Their true explication is reserved for the adepts, the princes of Masonry. In other words, those in the higher degrees. The whole body of the royal and sacerdotal art, that is the priestly art, was hidden so carefully centuries since in the high degrees, as that it is even yet impossible to solve many of the enigmas or mysteries which they contain. It is well enough for the mass of those called Masons to imagine that all is contained in the blue degrees, and whoso attempts to undeceive them will labor in vain and without any true reward violate his obligations as an adept. what he just said in the last part of that is that the common Masons, the average Mason who never gets out of the Blue Lodge, which is the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry, does not know there's something a lot more to the meaning behind the symbols and the rituals of Freemasonry. He says we have intentionally lied to those, especially of the lower degrees, the first 3 degrees of Masonry, and they don't even know we've lied to them, but we've intentionally done that. They suppose they know the meanings, but they don't know the meanings. And he said, whoso attempts to undeceive them will labor in vain. So having read that from Albert Pike, the authority in Freemasonry, I fully understand that Masons that are listening or watching this presentation now or in the future will not think that I have any clue what I'm talking about, but you're going to see it from their words for yourself, and you can do your due diligence and should do your due diligence to see if what I've said is true. All right, the next one is also from Albert Pike in Morals and Dogma. He said, Masonry, like all religions, all the mysteries, conceals its secrets from all except the adepts and sages or the elect, that is, those in the know, those higher up, and uses false explanations and misinterpretations of its symbols to mislead those who deserve only to be misled, to conceal the truth, which it calls light, from them, and to draw them away from it. Truth is not for those who are unworthy or unable to receive it, or would it. So, he's saying those down here, they think they know what the secrets mean, what the secrets are. They don't know what the secrets are. They just imagine that they know. You already seeing how it's a pyramid of lies. It's not a pyramid scheme of dollars. It's a pyramid of lies. The masters of Freemasonry, and here's about their secrets. This is from Manly P. Hall, the one that I said was the most open about their occultic influences in Freemasonry. Freemasonry is a fraternity within a fraternity. It's an outer organization concealing an inner brotherhood of the elect. Now, what he just told you is that most of the Masons in Freemasonry don't know what's going on. There's a little group of us in Freemasonry up here at the top. We know what's going on. The rest of them are just here to shield us, to hide us from being exposed. That's what he's saying by that first statement. Let me continue. Before it is possible to intelligently discuss the origin of the craft, it is necessary, therefore, to establish the existence of these 2 separate yet interdependent orders, the one visible and the other invisible. The visible society is a splendid camaraderie of free and accepted men enjoined to devote themselves to ethical, educational, fraternal, patriotic, and humanitarian concerns. And if you go speak to anybody you know that is a Mason, those are the things he's going to tell you is what Masonry is all about. Those are the things that he will tell you are the reasons he joined Freemasonry. But he just told you, Manly P. Hall, 33rd degree Mason, one of the most respected, at least among the modern writers of Freemasonry, just told you that they're the visible body. They're the ones that everybody sees. They're not the ones at the top that are the invisible group that nobody knows about that are running the show. The invisible society is a secret and most august fraternity whose members are dedicated to the service of a mysterious arcanum arcanorum, which means mystery of mysteries. It means the truth behind all alchemy, magic, and astrology. Those brethren who have essayed to write the history of their craft have not included in their disquisitions the story of that truly secret inner society, which is to the body Freemasonic what the heart is to the human body. He said those that have written histories about Freemasonry, they have intentionally not told the public about this little core group that runs everything. In each generation, only a few are accepted into the inner sanctuary of the quote-unquote work, capital W. But these are veritable princes of the truth, and their sainted names shall be remembered in future ages together with the seers and prophets of the elder world, that is the old world. Though the great initiate philosophers of Freemasonry can be counted upon one's fingers, yet their power is not to be measured by the achievements of ordinary men. They are dwellers upon the threshold of the innermost, masters of that secret doctrine, which forms the invisible foundation of every great theological and rational institution. He says that that little cadre of Masons at the very top of the pyramid, they're the ones that are behind everything that has to do with all the religious organizations, theological, and all the rational organizations, the universities. He said our little cadre at the top are the masterminds putting out the information to religious and educational institutions. There's an intentional deception of ignorant non-Masons and lower-level Masons. And when I use the word ignorant here, I don't mean stupid, can't think for themselves. I mean they don't know the information. That's what the word ignorant means. It means you just don't know something. As the Sovereign Grand Commander Henry Clausen admits, quote, "It must be apparent that the Blue Lodge, the first 3 degrees, cannot explain the whole of Masonry. They are the foundation. An initiate may imagine he understands the ethics, symbols, and enigmas, whereas a true explanation of these is reserved for the more adept." Now this is Clausen writing in his commentaries on Albert Pike's book, Morals and Dogma. Albert Pike, again, a direct quote from him in Morals and Dogma, "Be laborious," it says, "like the star, and procure the light of the sages, and hide yourself from the stupid, profane, and the ambitious, and be like the owl, which sees only by night, and hides itself from treacherous curiosity." Albert Pike is letting us know that those who are the enlightened ones, they're not supposed to let everybody know they're the enlightened ones, and they're supposed to do their seeking for this special knowledge away from the curious eyes of interlopers like you and I that are talking about it at a Baptist church on a Sunday night. The great deceiver. It should come as no surprise to even the newest believer in Christ that the deceiver, that is the devil, would devise a plan to intentionally deceive new initiates in an institution which he is using to change human society for his own agenda. What you're going to see from here on out is that Freemasonry is being used to change society in every institution, worldwide. Not with the intentional knowledge of most of the Masons that you and I know that are good men, but they're being used to take and propel the movement forward and to forward the agenda. Look at these 2 verses. John 8:44, Jesus said, "Ye are of your father the devil, and the lusts of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar, and the father of it." And folks, the Masons themselves just admitted they lie intentionally to their initiates. Who's the father of lies? It's the devil himself. And Revelation 12:9 says, "And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him." Coming tribulation that follows, the one world system the Antichrist is going to attempt to put together, a religious, commercial, and political system all rolled into one, the world has to be prepared to accept what's coming. Because the average person 10 years ago, 20 years ago, certainly 50 years ago, would never have accepted what's coming. You and I are seeing in our lifetime what's about to come. It's right over the horizon. Freemasonry in the Bible. I'm a Baptist. I'm a fundamental independent Baptist preacher. That King James Bible is the final authority in every area of life. I hope it is for you too. Masons, especially those in American lodges, believe that the tenets of Freemasonry are based primarily on the Bible. That's what Albert Pike said. Is it true? Well, you'll have to decide that for yourself afterwards. But Albert Pike is telling us that Masons in American lodges are intentionally led to believe that Freemasonry's principles are based on the Bible. And that's why most of the men you know that are Masons are good men, and they're going to be offended if you tell them a Mason should not be a Christian. But let's continue. Let me hold the comments till the end. He continues on page 224 of Morals and Dogma. The doctrines of the Bible are often not clothed in the language of strict truth, but in that which was fittest to convey to a rude and ignorant people the practical essentials of doctrine. Albert Pike just basically said that your Bible should not be taken literally. It was given to ignorant, stupid people who couldn't understand the true principles of enlightenment, and that's why you have what's written in the Bible. But come to us and we'll tell you what it really means. Here he says on page 744, the Bible, with all its allegories it contains, expresses in an incomplete and veiled manner only the religious science of the Hebrews. Again, he's saying that the Bible, even at best, is veiled, contains hidden truths. Well, if they contain hidden truths, who do you go to get those hidden truths? Obviously, he's not recommending the local Baptist church. He's recommending Freemasonry as the source of that hidden knowledge. On page 105, he says, the teachers, even of Christianity, are in general the most ignorant of the true meaning of that which they teach. There is no book of which so little is known as the Bible. To most who read it, it is as incomprehensible as the Zohar, which is a Kabbalistic writing of the Jews. I will agree with one thing he said. There is no book of which so little is known as the Bible. But the only reason there's so little known about it is Christians don't spend their time in it. But everything you and I need is in that book. And you don't need the Baptist preacher or the Pope or the worshipful master at the lodge to tell you what's in that book. All you need is the Holy Spirit of God to tell you what's in that book. Even a child can understand. The key to understanding the Word of God, much to the contrary of Albert Pike, is this. 1 Corinthians 2:14 says, but the natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him, neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. 2 Peter 1:20, knowing this first, that no prophecy of the Scripture is of any private interpretation. And this is what I say every time I teach our folks here at Pinnacle Baptist Church on how to read the Bible. These verses are telling you, you take it literally exactly the way that it's written. It says what it means, and it means what it says, as my grandpa used to say. And so this idea that there are secret hidden meanings to Scripture that you can't figure out for yourself, that's the same thing that the Catholic Church tells people, so you have to go to the Catholic Church. The Masons are no different in what they're saying. The key is not having the secrets of the mysteries that Albert Pike believed himself to possess, and it is not being, quote, illuminated by having the learned ability to put off the, quote, rude and ignorant veiled truths of the Bible as Freemasonry purports. No, the key to understanding the Word of God is seeking to understand it with a sincere heart and possessing the Holy Spirit, its author, as a child of God. Scripture means what it says and says what it means. If not the Bible, then what? And what I mean by that title on the slide is if they're not following the Bible, if it's not the ultimate source of light, knowledge, wisdom, what do the Masons think is the source of light, knowledge, and wisdom that is behind the Bible, that is the greater truths that are veiled, as he said, in the Bible? Let's find out what they think is the greater authority. Quoting from pages 744 and on in Morals and Dogma, Albert Pike, in the Bible of Freemasonry, reveals that the, quote, great light of Freemasonry is, quote, all truly dogmatic religions, that is Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Islam, Hinduism, all of those dogmatic religions have issued from the Kabbalah. You can say Kabbalah, Kabbalah, whichever way you want to pronounce it, and they have returned to it. Everything scientific and grand in their religious dreams of the Illuminati, Jacob Boehme, Swedenborg, St. Martin, and others is borrowed from the Kabbalah. All the Masonic associations owe to it their secrets and their symbols. Here's the most revered authority on the symbols and meanings of Freemasonry. He just told you all their meanings come not from the Bible, but from the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah alone consecrates the alliance of the universal reason and divine word. So here we go back to humanism, man's intellect and reason ability. Thus was a second Bible, in parentheses the Kabbalah, unknown to, or rather uncomprehended by, the Christians. A collection, they say, of monstrous absurdities. And I'm going to tell you as a Baptist preacher, that's exactly what the Kabbalah is a collection of monstrous absurdities by unbelieving Jews over several hundreds of years, the same Jews who rejected Jesus as the Messiah, and Jesus said, you're of your father the devil. That's the source that Albert Pike says is behind the real meaning of all the secrets of Freemasonry. He goes on to say, quote, one is filled with admiration on penetrating into the sanctuary of the Bible? No. The sanctuary of the Kabbalah, at seeing a doctrine so logical, so simple, and at the same time so absolute. By the way, these are the secrets from the Tower of Babel. These are the secrets from Mystery Babylon that we've talked about here at Pinnacle Baptist in studies we've done on Mystery Babylon before, that started at the Tower of Babel, will finish out at the kingdom of the Antichrist, which is yet to come. These principles he's talking about are not from the Bible. He just admitted where they're from. The Kabbalah, which is this collection of Jewish mystical writings that have no basis in the Bible, nor do they believe Jesus is God. So what is the Kabbalah? The Kabbalah is a collection of writings of occultic Jewish mysticism not contained in the Bible. It includes such writings of Jewish mysticism as the Zohar. By the way, you'll hear lots of Hollywood actors, which an inordinate number of are Jews, by the way, unbelieving Jews, talk about the Zohar. It's a Kabbalistic writing is all it is. It's an unbiblical, anti-biblical collection of writings by unbelieving Jews over the centuries. The ancient Jews learned it during their time in Egypt, their time among the Canaanites, and their time in captivity to Babylon. Its origins are Mystery Babylon, the satanic religion begun at the Tower of Babel in Genesis 11 by Nimrod and his wife Semiramis. Here's our Sunday school lesson this morning. And this religion is the basis for all of the ancient mystery religions, including the intricate religions of Isis and Osiris. Sunday school class, here we go. Baal and Ashtaroth in Canaan, and a myriad of others. So the Kabbalah, it's the basis for all those ancient pagan religions in Egypt, the Canaanites, the Assyrians, and every other ancient civilization, including Babylon, from which it originated at the Tower of Babel. They're telling you where their symbols and meanings come from. You're not convinced by what Albert Pike had to say about it? Listen to what some of these others had to say. Here's Helena Blavatsky, the co-founder of the Theosophical Society I told you about, which is nothing but an occult, satanic organization that was involved with divination and conjuring up spirits, which were nothing but devils. She said, the Kabbalah is indeed the essence of Freemasonry. She was one of the ones responsible for Freemasonry opening itself up to allowing women to become part of Freemasonry in different organizations in the late 1800s. Here's another Freemason author, F. De P. Castell. He says Freemasonry is Kabbalism in another garb. Here is Freemason Ledbetter from his article his book entitled Freemasonry and Its Ancient Mystic Rites. He says the Jewish mysteries are the source of our present tradition in Freemasonry. Aleister Crowley, anybody ever heard of him? He's the most well-known Satanist of the late 19th and early 20th century. He lived in England. He was an out-and-out Satanist, worshipped Satan, said he called himself the Beast. And every wicked and perverted thing you can imagine went on with what he did. By the way, this is for another night and another discussion. He was behind the fellow who started the Jet Propulsion Laboratories in Los Alamos, which is behind NASA's foundings. He was also the one behind L. Ron Hubbard, who wrote Dianetics and was the founder of Scientology. He was the #1 Satanist of the late 19th, early 20th century. Here's what he said about Freemasonry. The whole basis of our theory is the Kabbalah. He spelled it strangely, but he said the same thing. Here's Manly P. Hallmer, again, the Manly P. Hall, 33rd degree Freemason. He said the theories of Kabbalism are inextricably interwoven with the tenets of alchemy, Hermeticism, Rosicrucianism, and Freemasonry. Here's Albert Mackey, another source we've quoted. The Kabbalah may be defined to be a system of philosophy which embraces certain mystical interpretations of Scripture. Not a literal interpretation, a mystical interpretation, and metaphysical and spiritual beings. Much use is made of it in the advanced degrees, and entire rites have been constructed on its principles. So Albert Mackey is admitting that in Freemasonry, the higher degrees are based almost completely on the Kabbalah, not on anything else. Here's another one of the writers of Freemasonry. He says, Masonry cannot be fully appreciated or understood without knowledge of the Kabbalist tree of life. We'll see the tree of life in just a minute. By the way, there are lots of organizations, including New Age churches, cropping up all over our area that have this tree and all of their imagery. You can decide what you want to about the tree, but it's prevalent in this occultic Enlightenment movement. Albert Pike, again, he said the Kabbalah is the key of the occult sciences. Below that, Albert Pike continues in Morals and Dogma. He says the true philosophy known and practiced by Solomon. He's talking about King Solomon, the wisest man that ever lived. They use his name in vain in Freemasonry, but he says that the true philosophy of Solomon is the basis on which Masonry is founded. According to Talmudic legends, Jewish legends, Solomon understood the mysteries of the Kabbalah. He was also a necromancer. That's one who speaks to the dead, being able to summon demons, according to Manly P. Hall. And that's what he says about King Solomon. That's not what my Bible teaches about King Solomon. The Bible does teach King Solomon was led astray from God by having 700 wives and 300 concubines, or as my 7th grade Bible teacher said, 700 wives and 300 porcupines. Whichever it was, he did get led astray into following false gods. But the Bible says nothing about King Solomon trying to speak to the dead and being involved with devils and demons. Albert Pike, last of all, he says, Freemasonry is a search after light. By the way, who's the angel of light? I think you already know the answer to that. He says that search leads us directly back, as you see, to the Kabbalah. So is Freemasonry based on the Bible and biblical principles? No. It's based on these mystical teachings of unsaved, unbelieving Jews who not only didn't believe, they are the ones who had Jesus crucified. Here's the tree of life. In this satanic, esoteric philosophy and religion, everything is backwards from the way it is in reality. Lucifer, quote, the light bearer, is the good guy in the story, And Jehovah of the Bible is the evil, malevolent enemy of mankind who seeks to keep him from the knowledge necessary to become as gods. It's the same lie that the serpent told Eve in the garden. So Freemasonry has adopted the Kabbalah, which has the whole story turned around. Our God is the bad guy trying to keep mankind from having this special knowledge so he can become as a god. And Satan is the good guy in the story. He's trying to help mankind get this special light, this special illuminated knowledge that our God don't want us to have. And you know what? Our God was trying to protect Adam and Eve in the garden. That's why he told them not to eat the fruit off that tree. He did it because he loved them. And if you're a parent or a grandparent, you have rules for your children because you love them and care about them too. He's saying, no, it's backwards. Now, I'm not encouraging you to watch it, but if you ever saw that Russell Crowe movie that came out a decade ago on Noah, that Hollywood movie about Noah had this exact story. They totally reversed the characters. The God that you and I serve was the bad guy. The good guy was the fallen angels that were trying to help lost mankind, led by Tubal-Cain, one of Cain's descendants on the earth before the flood, trying to help them gain special knowledge that our God wanted to keep from them. Because our God is a malevolent, hateful God. At least that's the way it was portrayed in the film. And I kept telling people, I made the mistake of going to see it, thinking that Hollywood might have done something right on a Bible movie, which they don't do. But I kept telling people, this is I don't know the details, but I can tell, I feel it in my spirit, this is a Masonic movie. Sure enough, I started looking up all the names of the different things in it. It's all Freemasonry. It's the story of the Kabbalah. That's the reason that Freemasonry is a search for, quote, light or illumination. This quest for hidden knowledge leads one further from God, not closer to Him. The knowledge that it reveals does not produce holiness, obedience, nor submission to God. Rather, this special knowledge that comes from the serpent, it produces licentiousness, that's living however you want to live, rebellion, and arrogance towards God. And by the way, isn't that what we're seeing in our society today? Guess who's been running the show? It is the spirit which is currently leading Hollywood, Washington, D.C., and many contemporary-style churches in America. The Kabbalah is often associated with the tree of life, you see pictured down here, in its literature and teachings. In reality is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil with which it is associated, the forbidden fruit which leads man away from God, not to God. All right, I'm keeping an eye on the time. I'm going to go a few minutes over. If you need to go, quietly make your way out that back door, but everybody else stay put for a few minutes. Is Freemasonry Christian? I've heard numerous Masons say that Freemasonry is a Christian organization. I believe that they all sincerely believed what they said. They were wrong. Who said that? The preacher? The Baptist preacher? Nope. Albert Mackey, one of the one that is the most quoted authority before Albert Pike. He said, I believe they all sincerely believed what they said, that it's a Christian organization. He said they were wrong. Here's one of the head Masons saying all those Masons that tells you it's a Christian organization, they're wrong. Now who are you going to believe? Those Masons you and I know that are in the first 3 degrees of the Blue Lodge, or this fellow who's the head honcho that's writing the meaning behind all the rites and rituals of Freemasonry that's still in use, and his books are still in every Masonic lodge in this entire area if you drove and looked through their library. Who are you going to believe is telling the truth? The guy that's only been in the first 3 degrees, or the guy that's writing the degrees and the rituals? I think it ought to be clear who knows what they're talking about. Many American Masons believe that Freemasonry is Christian because, number one, a Bible is prominently featured in their local lodge. Number two, many of their fellow lodge brothers attend church. And number three, there may even be someone who leads in prayer at the meetings in their local lodge. And you know, that's why they think Freemasonry is Christian. What many Masons may not know, however, is that in some lodges, instead of a Bible being prominently featured, there may be either the Jewish Torah or a Mohammedan Quran or the Hindu Vedas. Freemasonry only requires of its initiates that they believe in one God and the eternal nature of man. Consequently, no religion is elevated above the others among the initiates, and no Mason is permitted to speak ill of another religion which differs from his own. All religions are treated as equals. Now, your preacher preached on that this morning. Are all religions equal? No. Are all gods equal? No. All roads may lead to Rome, but there's only one way to heaven. And Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me, Jesus said. Look what Mackey said in his Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. If Freemasonry were simply a Christian institution, like most Masons you and I know think it is, by the way, the Jew and the Muslim, the Brahmin, he means Brahmin, and the Buddhist could not conscientiously partake of its illumination, but its universality is its boast. In other words, you can be a Mason and believe in any God you want to believe as long as you believe in one God and the eternality of man's soul. You believe in whatever God you want to believe. So the Masons you and I know might have a Bible sitting in their lodge. Meanwhile, in some of the other lodges, there's a Quran sitting there or a Hindu Veda sitting there. Here's what Pike says from Morals and Dogma. I won't read the whole thing, but he says, it is the universal, eternal, immutable religion, such as God planted it in the heart of universal humanity, that universal religion, I'm skipping down, taught by nature and reason. It's all humanism. It's all intellect. It's all rational thinking. It's nothing about faith in God. It's nothing about the Bible. It's nothing about Jesus. It's nothing but Enlightenment humanism like we saw in the 17th century. But still other Masons contend that Freemasonry is not a religious organization at all. I've had Freemasons tell me that it's a Christian organization. I've had other Masons tell me it's not a religious organization at all. We leave religion out of it. They're wrong too. Albert Mackey said, I am not disposed to yield on the subject of the religious character of Masonry quite so much as has been yielded by more timid brethren. He says, others, they won't talk about the fact that it's a religious organization. He said, but I'm not bashful about it. I'm going to talk about it. On the contrary, I contend without any sort of hesitation that Masonry is, in every sense of the word except one, and that its least philosophical an eminently religious institution, that it is indebted solely to the religious element which it contains for its origin and for its continued existence, and that without this religious element, it would scarcely be worthy of cultivation by the wise and good. He just told you, no matter what those other Masons tell you that it's not a religious organization, he said, I'm here to tell you it's a religious organization. And if it wasn't for all the religious components and elements to Freemasonry, it wouldn't be worth doing. That's what he just said. By the way, those religious components did not come from the religion of this book, the Bible. They came from that universality of believe whatever you want to believe, as long as it's a God and the eternality of man. Mackey also says on page 107, by the way, both baptism and communion are practiced in some of the degrees of Freemasonry. Now, again, I'm a Baptist preacher, so you'll have to forgive me if you're here and you're not a Baptist, but in the Baptist church, we believe that God only gave the authority to practice baptism and communion to the local New Testament church. What is Freemasonry doing baptizing people and offering communion to people? Here's what Mackey says on page 107. Masonic baptism is simply a lustration or purification by water, a ceremony which was common to all the ancient initiations. And by the way, he's right. All of the ancient mystery pagan religions had some component of baptism as part of their initiation rituals. And they were all had to do with the same basic concept that Roman Catholicism has in its tenets today. That is the belief of washing sins away and being raised new by the waters of baptism. That's not what the Bible teaches either, by the way. See me afterwards if you have a question. In the 26th degree of Masonry, Albert Pike says, quote, here's the question. What are the symbols of the purification necessary to make us perfect Masons? The answer, lavation, which is being washed with water, with pure water or baptism. Because to cleanse the body is emblematical of purifying the soul. And because it conduces to the bodily health, and virtue is the health of the soul as sin and vice are its malady and sickness. Unction or anointing with oil, because thereby we are set apart and dedicated to the service and priesthood of the beautiful, the true, and the good. I don't know about you, but when I became a Baptist preacher, and before that when I became a born-again Christian, I was not dedicated, consecrated to the beautiful, the true, and the good. I was dedicated to the Lord Jesus Christ. And if you're going to go to heaven, that's the only way you're going to get there too, by the way. But here are Masons baptizing people. Here they are anointing people with oil. Mackey says on page 126, consecrated bread and wine, that is to say bread and wine used not simply for food, but made sacred by the purpose of symbolizing a bond of brotherhood, and the eating and drinking of which are sometimes called the communion of the brethren, is found in some of the higher degrees, such as the order of high priesthood in the American Rite. Here he's saying, we offer communion at the Masonic Lodge. Now you and I know what communion is supposed to symbolize. The Bible tells us that. The body and blood of the Lord Jesus Christ. They don't believe Jesus is God. They don't believe Christianity is above any of the other religions. So what exactly are they consecrating those elements to and saying they represent? It's not the body of Christ and the blood of the Lord Jesus. And any Mason you talk to probably is not going to admit to you that they take communion in the lodge, because they're not supposed to give out the secrets or they'll be in trouble. So if you ask them about it, they're probably going to lie to you anyway, because you're a profane initiate and you're unworthy of the truth. But if they told you the truth, the question would have to be, what kind of communion are you taking? What does the bread and the juice represent? It doesn't represent Jesus. All right, I'm about through. Morals and Dogma, Albert Pike said in the 26th degree again, what is to us the chief symbol of man's ultimate redemption and regeneration? Now that of course would be Jesus dying on the cross or something related to that. Look at the answer. The fraternal supper of bread which nourishes and of wine which refreshes and exhilarates, symbolical of the time to come. When Jesus is coming back? Nope. Look what it says. When all mankind shall be one great harmonious brotherhood. To our Jewish brethren, this supper is symbolical of the Passover. To the Christian Mason, of that eaten by Christ and His disciples when celebrating the Passover. He's saying, we let whatever religion a person is, no, I'm okay, thank you. I let them just assign to themselves whatever they think the symbology is, but in reality, it's all about when all mankind shall be one great harmonious brotherhood. You know when that day is going to be? It's going to be when all of mankind rises up against the Lord Jesus Christ when He comes back. That's when all of mankind will be in that one big harmonious hurrah together. If Freemasonry is not a religious organization, why is it practicing baptism and communion rites? What purification by water baptism can Freemasonry offer? How are bread and wine made sacred by Freemasonry, And by what authority does it pretend to exercise an ordinance of the local New Testament church? Freemasonry, just like many of the ancient pagan mystery religions, practiced their own versions of baptism and communion. The things practiced by Freemasonry are religious, but their meanings are not Christian. They're shrouded, they're made to appear to be Christian, so that the Christian will assume they're Christian. The Jew will assume it's Jewish, and so on and so on. A side-by-side comparison. We've already seen a number of things about Freemasonry which should give any Christian cause for consideration about whether a Christian should be a Mason. You've already seen and heard plenty in their own words to make a right decision. But we will now embark upon a series of side-by-side comparisons with what Freemasonry says and what the Bible says on a number of different matters. Are you sincerely keeping an open heart with the right spirit? And the topic for tonight is the religious ceremonies within the Masonic Lodge. As I told you last week, there are some Masons who will tell you that Freemasonry is not religious at all, and there are other Masons that will tell you, well, of course it's religious, it's a Christian organization. And neither one of those are correct. You'll see that as we go through. I quoted Albert Mackey is in bold up at the top. He's one of the chief authorities of Freemasonry. He said the religion of Freemasonry is not Christian. So next time you have a Mason that tells you that, ask him who Albert Mackey is, and then when he goes on to tell you what a great Mason Albert Mackey was, you can tell him Albert Mackey said Freemasonry is not Christian. Look down a couple of paragraphs there. You see Albert Mackey being quoted in his Encyclopedia of Freemasonry on page 579 says, its universality is its boast. He's speaking of Freemasonry. He said if Freemasonry were simply a Christian institution, the Jew, the Muslim, the Brahm, and the Buddhist could not conscientiously partake of its, quote, illumination. So the Masons make it very clear that Freemasonry is not a Christian religion and that it is universal in its appeal and its beliefs. That means you could be a member of any religion you wanted to be as long as you believe in one God, not many gods, and as long as you believe in the eternality of the human soul. So he says the universality of it is its boast. That means it's not Christian. It can be whatever religion you want it to be. The last quote down here is from Albert Pike in Morals and Dogma. He says, again, it is the universal, eternal, immutable religion, such as God planted it in the heart of universal humanity. That universal religion taught by nature and reason. That sounds right out of the 17 and 1800s, the Enlightenment period around the world. Nature and reason is the source of truth. You and I know those are not the sources of truth. The Bible says there's a way which seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. So we are not able to figure out truth simply by our own rational abilities. We need the revealed Word of God. It is the Bible that is to be the final authority and arbiter of truth. And then, as I said, there's some Masons will say, no, it's not religious at all. And of course, you know that's not the case. We already looked at Albert Mackey's quote up here. He says it's an eminently religious institution that is indebted solely to the religious element which it contains for its origin and for its continued existence, and that without this religious element, it would scarcely be worthy of cultivation by the wise and good. So Albert Mackey says it is religious, but it's not Christian. And that religion is what we're going to look at more tonight. We talked about last week how Freemasonry practices both baptism and communion in some of their rituals. That doesn't mean every time they meet at the lodge, but some of their rituals include communion and baptism. And of course, those are the ordinances of the local New Testament church to only the church God gave the authority to do either of those things. And if it's not Christian, by their own words, why are they practicing communion and baptism within the Masonic Lodge? And why are Christians who are attending and members of the Masonic Lodge, why are they okay partaking of communion and baptism from an institution that overtly says this is not a Christian institution? Any Christian ought to know better. As I said when we started this series 2 Sundays ago, no Mason you know is going to know everything in this presentation over the course of this series. Most Masons do not know the stuff that we're going to finish up with the end of tonight and next week. But all Masons know some of what we're presenting. And all Masons know enough to know as a Christian that they ought not be partaking of these things that are religious in nature, Christian in nature, if it's not a Christian institution, and if it's not the local New Testament church that is the authority. We said we're going to put side by side what Freemasonry says and what the Bible says. So now we begin our new material for the week. In whom do you put your trust? Now this is where it gets interesting, because for most of tonight we're going to be talking about the actual rituals that someone goes through if they want to become a Mason, and the things they do after they become a Mason. So as we walk through this process for a new initiate, listen carefully, and if you want to take pictures, you can do that. If not, jot down notes if you'd like to do that. During his initiation of the first degree of Masonry, a candidate is asked the question, in whom do you put your trust? Now, he's asked that question as he's kneeling at an altar that you see pictured in this slide right here. Every Masonic Lodge is built and decorated a little differently on the inside, but there are some commonalities to all of them, and all Masonic Lodges have an altar that is either permanently in the center of their main meeting room or can be brought out to the center of their meeting room when they have initiations. You see the Masonic Lodge pictured there. It always has the 3 great lights on top of the altar when they're actually performing one of their initiations. The 3 great lights are whatever book of faith they have chosen for their particular lodge. In Christian lodges, quote unquote, that could be the Bible. In some that are Jewish lodges, it would be what we would call the Old Testament, or maybe even just the books of Moses, the Torah, the law. In some, if they are Muslim lodges, they might have a Quran there instead of a Bible. If they are in a Hindu lodge, they might have a book of the Vedas, their religious writings. But the 3 great works are whatever book of faith goes along with that particular lodge, and then the square and the compass, those other 2 symbols of Freemasonry, those will be lying on the top of the altar as the initiate is being initiated. We're going to go in more depth through the initiation process in a moment, but for the moment just look at the question that he is asked as he's being initiated. In whom do you put your trust? His reply is supposed to be in God. It doesn't matter whether he's in a quote-unquote Christian lodge, Muslim lodge, Hindu lodge, Buddhist lodge, doesn't matter. The initiate is supposed to have the same answer in every lodge, in God. As a Mason, he is free to interpret Masonic symbols, allegory, and actions according to his own conception of their spiritual meaning, whether he be a Christian, Jew, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, Buddhist, or other religious persuasion. Upon answering in God, the candidate is then taken by the right hand and informed that his trust being in God, his faith is well-founded, and he is ordered to arise, follow his conductor, and fear no danger. But now wait a second. If the initiate is asked the question, in whom do you put your trust, and he says, in God, If it's in a quote-unquote Christian Masonic lodge, he's putting his faith in, supposedly, the God of the Bible. But if he's in a Muslim lodge, he's putting his faith in the Muslim God, known as Allah. If he's in, the Hindu or the Jewish or whatever, he's putting his faith in whatever the God is that he relates to. But if the worshipful master of the lodge, in every circumstance, says that your faith being in God, your faith is well-founded, how can that be true of everyone? Because not every God is the same, and not every God is a well-founded place to put your faith, right? The candidate is told that his faith is well-founded, whether he's Christian, Hindu, Mohammedan, Buddhist, Zoroastrian, Mormon, or other. Is this consistent with biblical teachings? Acts 4:12 says, "Neither is there salvation in any other, for there is none other name under heaven given among men whereby we must be saved." And that, of course, is the Lord Jesus Christ. Blood oaths. At each of their initiations in the Blue Lodge, the first 3 degrees of Masonry, an initiate is required to take an oath, a blood oath, before he is pronounced that he has passed to the next level of Masonry. All Masons take the same oaths of secrecy, not to divulge what they have heard as they travel through their degrees. If you know a Mason, he has taken these oaths. If you are a Mason, you have taken these oaths. So what you're about to see and hear, if you know a Mason, he has already taken these vows, these oaths. And as a Christian, again, he ought to know better. They're unbiblical. They're unscriptural. They're anti-biblical. As a Christian, any Christian man ought to have his conscience pricked by the Holy Spirit if he takes these oaths, which are contrary to Scripture. And if you know a Mason, he has taken these oaths. The oath of the entered apprentice, which is the first degree of the Blue Lodge. This is very first oath as a Mason. Listen to just what part of it says. This is not the whole thing. Binding myself under no less a penalty than that of having my throat cut across, my tongue torn out by its roots, and buried in the rough sands of the sea at low water mark, where the tide ebbs and flows twice in 24 hours, should I ever knowingly or willingly violate this my solemn oath and obligation as an entered apprentice Mason, so help me God and keep me steadfast in the due performance of the same. So he's saying, if I ever reveal any of the secrets of Masonry, may these things be done to me. Here's part of the oath of the fellowcraft, which is the second degree of the Blue Lodge. Binding myself under no less a penalty than that of having my left breast torn open, my heart plucked out, and given as a prey to the wild beasts of the field and the fowls of the air as a prey. That's part of the oath of the second degree. Now the oath of the Master Mason, which is the third degree of the Blue Lodge. It's the highest degree you can go through in the Blue Lodge. And then you have to choose if you want to go into one of the appendant bodies, the York Rite or the Scottish Rite, to advance on up through the other degrees of Masonry. But listen to part, not all, of the oath of a Master Mason. Binding myself under no less a penalty than that of having my body severed in two, my bowels taken from thence and burned to ashes, the ashes scattered to the four winds of heaven, so that no more trace or remembrance may be had of so vile and perjured a wretch as I, should I ever knowingly or willingly violate this my solemn obligation as a Master Mason. So help me God, and keep me steadfast in the due performance of the same. Now, these are the oaths that they are taking, and the Mason that is confronted with these things, number one, he's not supposed to acknowledge that they are true, for he has taken a solemn vow. But number two, if he is confronted with it and can't squirm away from it, he is going to say something along the lines, well, this is just an allegorical thing. It's not meant to be taken literally. And yet, a vow is a vow. And the Bible has a number of things to say about taking vows lightly, whether a person be saved or lost. A vow is not something to be taken lightly. Whether you're saved or not saved.
The pledge to the American flag. So where did that come from, guys? Does anybody know? The Pledge of Allegiance was written in August 1892 by Francis Bellamy, 1855 to 1931, who was a Baptist minister, a Christian socialist, who was also a Mason and the cousin of the socialist utopian novelist Edward Bellamy. Bellamy's gravesite is located in the Rome Cemetery in Rome, New York. The original Pledge of Allegiance was published in the September 8th issue of the popular children's magazine, The Youth's Companion, as part of a national public school celebration of Columbus Day. A marketer for the magazine as a campaign to instill the idea of American nationalism in students and sell flags to public schools. According to author Margaret S. Miller, this was in line with Upham's vision, which he would often say to his wife, "Mary, if I can instill into the minds of our American youth the love for their country and principles on which it was founded, and creating them an ambition to carry on the ideals which the early founders wrote in the Constitution, I shall not have lived in vain." The pledge was supposed to be quick and to the point. Bellamy designed it to be recited in 15 seconds. As a socialist, he had initially also considered using the words equality and fraternity, but decided against it, knowing that the state superintendents of education on his committee were against equality for women and African Americans. Oh. Bowing to the desires of other people, huh? Francis Bellamy and Upham had lined up the National Education Association to support the youth's campaign as a sponsor of the Columbus Day observance, along with the use of the American flag. By June 29, 1892, Bellamy and Upham had arranged for Congress and President Benjamin Harrison to announce a proclamation making the public school flag ceremony the center of the Columbus Day celebrations. This was used as Presidential Proclamation 335. Subsequently, the pledge was first used in public schools on October 12, 1892, during Columbus Day observances organized to coincide with the opening of the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, Illinois. It's all got to do with more Columbus worship, I guess. In 1923, the National Flag Conference called for the words, "My flag," to be changed to "the flag of the United States." Oh, by the way, the pledge to the flag that you know now is not the one that Francis Bellamy came up with. As you just heard here, it used to just say, "My flag," so whatever flag you serve, to being more specific about the flag of the United States. But really what I want to point out is Francis Bellamy never actually put "under God" in the pledge. In 1923, the National Flag Conference called for the words "My flag" to be changed to "the flag of the United States" so that the new immigrants would not confuse loyalties between their birth countries and the United States. The words of America were added a year later. The United States Congress officially recognized the pledge for the first time in the following forum on June 22, 1942. Louis Albert Bowman, an attorney from Illinois, was the first to initiate the addition of "under God" to the pledge. The National Society of the Daughters of American Revolution gave him an award of merit as the originator of this idea. He spent his adult life in Chicago area and was a chaplain of the Illinois Society of the Sons of the American Revolution. At a meeting February 12, 1948, Lincoln's birthday, he led the society in swearing the pledge with the two words added, "under God." And I have some words for you too. What God? The Lord Jesus Christ is never named in the pledge to the flag. So it's a God of these people, obviously. He stated that the words came from Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, though not all manuscript versions of the Gettysburg Address contain the words "under God." All the reporters' transcripts of the speech as delivered do. as perhaps Lincoln may have deviated from his prepared text and inserted the phrase when he said that the nation shall under God have a new birth of freedom, Bowman repeated his revised version of the pledge at other meetings. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Or stinky. It already did smell like dung though, but anyway. Because, listen, I don't know why a Christian would want to swear a pledge with all these other people of other faiths. Talking about swearing under one God with him. But when you read this, it makes more sense. In 1951, the Knights of Columbus, the world's largest Catholic fraternal service organization, or also known as Catholic Freemasonry, which my grandfather was a part of. I have other videos showing some of the little cute, filthy Knights of Columbus trash that he held on to. Do check out my videos, because the Knights of Columbus, they swear some other nasty oaths. The Knights of Columbus, the world's largest Catholic fraternal service organization, also began including the words under God in the Pledge of Allegiance. In New York City on April 30th, 1951, the Board of Directors of the Knights of Columbus adopted a resolution to amend the text of their Pledge of Allegiance at the opening of each meetings of the 800 fourth degree assemblies of the Knights of Columbus by the addition of the words under God after the words one nation. Over the next 2 years, the idea spread throughout Knights of Columbus organizations nationwide. On August 21, 1952, the Supreme Council of the Knights of Columbus at its annual meeting adopted a resolution urging that the change be made universal, and copies of this resolution were sent to the President, the Vice President, as presiding officer of the Senate, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives. The National Fraternal Congress meeting in Boston, September 24, 1952, adopted a similar resolution upon the recommendations of President Supreme Knight Luke E. Hart. Several state fraternal congresses acted likewise almost immediately thereafter. This campaign led to several official attempts to prompt Congress to adopt the Knights of Columbus's policy for the entire nation. These attempts were eventually a success. Oh, imagine that. In 1952, Susan Arnold wrote a letter to President Truman suggesting the inclusion of under God in the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Langmack was a Danish philosopher and educator who came to the United States in 1911 to pervert everyone further with his delusion. Oh, excuse me, that part wasn't in there. He was one of the originators of the prayer breakfast and a religious leader in Washington, D.C. I guess he was a Billy Graham at his day, right? President Truman met with him along with several others to discuss the inclusion of under God just before with liberty and justice. At the suggestion of the correspondent, Representative Louis C. Rawbolt of Michigan sponsored a resolution to add the words under God to the pledge in 1953. The phrase under God was incorporated in the Pledge of Allegiance June 14, 1954 by a joint resolution of Congress amending Section 4 of the Flag Code enacted in 1942. On October 6, 1954, the National Executive Committee of the American Legion adopted the first resolution, first approved by the Illinois American Legion Convention in August 1954, which formally recognized the Knights of Columbus for having initiated and brought forward the amendment to the Pledge of Allegiance. Swearing the Pledge of Allegiance is swearing of the pledge is accompanied by a salute. An earlier version of the salute adopted in 1982 was known as the Bellamy salute. It started with the hand outstretched towards the flag, palm down, and ended with the palm up. Because of the similarity between the Bellamy salute and the well-known Nazi salute, you all really need to investigate the roots of what you're into. Developed later, the United States Congress instituted the hand over the heart gesture as a salute to be rendered by civilians during the Pledge of Allegiance and the national anthem in the United States, instead of the Bellamy salute. Removal of the Bellamy salute occurred December 22, 1942, and Congress amended the flag code language first passed into law June 22, 1942. Attached to bills passed in Congress in 2008 and then in 2009, Section 301B(1) of Title 36 United States Code. Language was included which authorized all activity due to military personnel and all veterans in civilian clothes to render a proper hand salute during the raising and lowering of the flag. When the colors are presented, and during the national anthem. So anyway, let me show you some cute pictures here of the Bellamy salute. Looks like same spirit was going on with the patriotism as Hitler was using with these salutes. But now a lot of people are like, now where did it say that Bellamy was a Mason? That's fine. I knew that was going to come up, and that's perfect and dandy and everything. So let's read here from the Grand Lodge of British Columbia in Yukon. They have a thing right here about Francis Bellamy. Let me read this to you. Francis Julius Bellamy, one-time Baptist minister and prominent member of the Christian Socialist movement, wrote the original USA Pledge of Allegiance, first published September 8, 1892, issued the Youth's Companion. Bellamy, then a committee and chairman of the National Education Association, which is also a huge enemy of Jesus Christ, structured a public school program around a flag-raising ceremony and a flag salute. His Pledge of Allegiance. This pledge since has come under several, sometimes controversial revisions. Bellamy's original words were, and by the way, I'm not swearing this oath. I piss on this oath. Pledge allegiance to my flag and the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice and Freemasonry for all. Oh, yeah, you know, he didn't put Freemasonry on there. Bellamy considered adding the word equality to stand with liberty and justice, but feared it would be too controversial. In 1924, against Bellamy's wishes, the American Legion and the Daughters of the American Revolution pressured the National Flag Conference to replace the words "my flag" with the flag of the United States of America. In 1954, under pressure from the Knights of Columbus, Congress officially added the words "under God." And he was a member of Little Falls Lodge number 181 in Little Falls, New York. So what's my biggest problem with the flag? I mean, other than, you know, Matthew 5:33, and the Bible explicitly condemns oath swearing. But really, my biggest thing is, why would a Christian swear an allegiance to an unknown God? Because the God that the American flag represents is the God of abortions, murder, sodomy, sodomite marriage, and every other ungodly law that is on the books of this country. That is the God that this country serves. It is not the God, the Lord Jesus Christ. So what God is it that this country serves?
Above is a picture of Charles Darwin giving the universal Freemason signal of the vow of silence. Every time you see a famous person giving this sign, it is intended as a signal to all fellow travelers that he is a Mason and is faithful to the craft. Fellow travelers is also a phrase used for communists when they're dealing with each other. I have used it. I have taken some liberty by using that phrase, but they are fellow travelers to the east, one with another, the Masons, that is. But what does the Bible say about promises that are made? What happens when the promises of a Mason's oath violates his duty to God? That is, what if those vows are contrary to the Word of God? Masons would say this never happens. Take a look at just a few of the promises that a Mason makes in the Master Mason degree. Now, this is some more of his oath that he takes in the third degree as a Master Mason. I furthermore promise and swear that I will stand to and abide by all the laws, rules, and regulations of a Master Mason's lodge so far as they shall come to my knowledge. By the way, that means he's putting whatever the rules, regulations of the lodge are above everything else. He just took a vow to that. I furthermore promise and swear that I will keep the secrets of a brother Master Mason communicated to me as such, murder and treason accepted, and they left to my own choice. Now, I don't know if you understand the significance of what that is. I'll let you let that sink in for a minute as I continue talking, but he's taking a vow that any other secret that a fellow Master Mason tells him as a Master Mason, he must keep it secret, with the two possible exceptions of murder and treason. So that means if he communicates that he stole something, raped someone, attacked someone, did this or did that, anything he communicates as a secret to a fellow Master Mason, that Master Mason has taken a vow not to divulge the information to anyone unless it's murder or treason. Now, not only is that not in keeping with just good ethics, but it's also contrary to the law of the land where we happen to live. And notice that it says murder and treason accepted, and they left to my own choice. Even if he tells me he murdered someone, I am not obligated, since he's a brother Master Mason, to go and tell the authorities this fellow murdered someone. This fellow is about to commit treason against our country. And we wonder why so many things happen in Washington that we can't explain, that seem totally inappropriate, and things are done in secret to the demise of our country. I submit to you it's because there is an inordinate percentage of those in the halls of Congress and the White House who have taken the oaths of Freemasonry, and their secrets are safe. That's why the Republicans don't bring out the things against the Democrats. The Democrats don't bring out the things against the Republicans that are held in secret. At the top, they're all in the same club, and they've promised to keep each other's secrets. I furthermore promise and swear that I will not cheat, wrong, or defraud a lodge of Master Masons or a brother of this degree, knowing them to be such, but I will give them due and timely notice that they may ward off all approaching danger. So he says, number one, I won't defraud another Master Mason. Well, what about the rest of us? What that means is they are free, at least in this vow, to defraud anybody else that's not a Master Mason. I don't know how you feel about that, but when I do business out in the business world, I like to know that the folks I'm doing business with are not trying to defraud me, and they're going to take it as seriously if they try to defraud me as if they try to defraud a brother Mason of theirs. Notice the last part of that, though, but I will give them due and timely notice that they may ward off all approaching danger. That means if I'm a Master Mason who has taken this oath, and I know that a fellow Master Mason is in danger because the authorities are coming for him, or someone knows what he did, or someone is out to get him, I am required to let him know, to warn him. Again, that explains so many of the things that go on in Washington every single day, does it not? Next one, I furthermore promise and swear that I will not violate the chastity of a Master Mason's wife, his mother, sister, or daughter, knowing them to be such. That is, he promises not to be inappropriate physically with a female relative of a brother Master Mason. Well, what about the rest of us that have mothers and sisters and daughters? You see, only the Master Masons are the ones that are protected here. I furthermore promise and swear that I will not give the grand hailing sign of distress, and we saw that last week, except it be in cases of the most imminent danger, or suffering in the cause of innocence and virtue, or in a just and lawfully constituted lodge of Master Masons, or in a lodge for instruction, or when I see or hear it given by a worthy brother in distress, I will fly to the relief of him which gives it, if there be a greater probability of saving his life than losing my own. Again, the Master Mason is taking a vow that if there's another Master Mason who gives the hailing sign of distress, whether it be the audible one, "O Lord my God, is there no help for the widow's son?" If I hear another fellow Master Mason give that distress signal, I am obligated to come to his rescue unless I know that he is guilty of whatever. If I don't know if he's guilty, then I'm obligated to come to his rescue. I wonder in the courtroom if that ever happens. I wonder in the courtroom if a judge is a Mason and a defendant is a Mason, Or I wonder in a courtroom if a prosecutor is a Mason and a defendant is a Mason. Well, the Masons will tell you, no, we don't violate the law and we honor the legal system when we're in the courtroom. But their oath that they take plainly says the opposite. You can choose to believe the Mason who tells you we don't do those things if you choose to believe that, but their vow says otherwise. As I told you 2 weeks ago, when we saw that the Masons themselves say, we intentionally teach the lower level initiates one thing, knowing that we're lying to them, and later on we'll tell them another lie. So do the Masons going through the 3 degrees of the Blue Lodge, do they even know what the truth is about this? You can decide for yourself, but their vow is pretty straightforward. What does the Bible say about oaths? First of all, should Christians allow such abuse of their bodies? You heard the vows. If I give up the secrets, may my throat be cut from ear to ear. If I give up the secrets, may my left breast be ripped open and my heart pulled out. If I give up the secrets of Masonry, may I be sawn asunder and my bowels taken out and burned to ashes. On and on we go. So should Christians allow such abuse of their bodies, which is what you're agreeing to if you give up the secrets of Masonry? 1 Corinthians 3, verse 16 and 17 says, know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you? If any man defile the temple of God, him shall God destroy. For the temple of God is holy, which temple ye are. Does my body belong to me? No. If I'm a Christian, my body is not my own. Paul said, I am bought with a price, the precious blood of Christ. I do not belong to myself. My body does not belong to myself. I have no authority to place a binding oath of abuse upon this body because it's not mine. I'm just using it. It belongs to God. Do Christians have a right to bind themselves in such oaths? Period. 1 Corinthians 6, verse 19 and 20 says, know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost which is in you, which ye have of God, and ye are not your own. For ye are bought with a price. Therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. In Galatians 5:1, Paul says, stand fast therewith in the liberty wherewith Christ hath made us free, and be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. Now here in Galatians 5, Paul, of course, is talking about entangling ourselves with the bondage to the Old Testament law, but binding myself under vows or oaths that in which I'm agreeing to the kind of things in the vows of Freemasonry, that's another example of me putting myself under bondage when I am at liberty in Christ. I ought not do that. My body does not belong to me. Masonic oaths are intended to make sure that initiates keep their Masonic secrets by instilling fear. But is this in keeping with godliness? They might say, well, that's just, it's just an allegory. It's not real. We don't take these oaths literally. We don't really expect somebody to come cut our throat if we give the secrets of Masonry. But I think you might find that Masons who are higher up Masons might feel a little differently about those fellow Masons who divulge their secrets. Preacher, what do they think about a Baptist preacher that's given away all their secrets? Well, I'm not a Mason. I've never taken their vows, but I'm going to give you a whole lot more of their secrets before we're through. 1 John 4:18 says, there is no fear in love, but perfect love casteth out fear, because fear hath torment. He that feareth is not made perfect in love. Anyone who keeps control of someone by using fear tactics, that's not love. And that's not Christian. That's the opposite. Isn't that what the tyrants of the world do? They use fear to control people. Isn't that what Roman Catholicism does? It uses fear to control the masses. It's communist, it's Catholic, it's not Christian. Should Christians be swearing oaths of any kind Well, look what James says in 5:12. But above all things, my brethren, swear not, neither by heaven, neither by the earth, neither by any other oath. But let your yea be yea, and your nay, nay, lest you fall into condemnation. James says, don't take any oaths at all. Don't swear by heaven above. Don't swear by the earth below. Don't swear by anything. Well, preacher, when we go to court, we're supposed to raise our right hand, put our left hand on the Bible, and they ask you, do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? You know, every time they ask me that, and I have to do that for business purposes on a regular basis, I say I affirm. I do affirm. Normally, they will ask you, do you swear or affirm? I never say I swear. I say I do affirm.
Let's take just a second and examine what the Bible says about this swearing business. James chapter 5, verse 12, but above all things. Look at that. But above all things, my brethren, swear not, neither by heaven, neither by the earth, neither by any other oath, but let your yea be yea, and your nay, nay, lest you fall into condemnation. Jesus Christ himself said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 33, again you have heard that it hath been said by them of old time, thou shalt not forswear thyself, but shalt perform unto the Lord thine oaths. But I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Neither shalt thou swear by thy head, because thou canst not make one hair white or black, but let your communication be yea, yea, nay, nay, for whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil. If it's more than yes or no, then you're wrong, sir. I don't completely agree with everything that this guy teaches. Also in this whole series, he's trying to teach this, should a Christian be a Mason? When it needs to actually be stated, can a Christian be a Mason? Or can a Mason be a Christian? You can't be both. You can only be one or the other. You're either a blood-bought, born-again Christian, or you're a stillborn child of the devil. But swear an oath for any reason, that's condemned in the Bible. It's really plain. And in James 5 he said, but above all things, my brethren, swear not. It's a serious matter, so if you want to take it lightly and say, oh, well, I affirm, that's just another word for an oath. Same for pledging to the flag. That's an oath. And that's swearing an oath unto an unknown God.
The Bible tells us not to swear, but I do affirm that I'm going to tell you the truth. There's a difference between that and swearing on this. Remember, I'll take questions at the end.
No, it's interesting. He really wanted to put that question off to the end, huh? Yeah. Look, you're wrong, Mr. Ray. You're just wrong. That's all I can say about that. Matthew chapter 5 and James chapter 5 both say that you're not to swear at all. And anything that cometh more than your yea or your nay, that's evil. It's not justifiable. Need to repent. The other thing about this is that the oath to the flag that he swears, that's the Masonic deception. You can claim to be against Freemasonry and actually be a part of it. You swear any of their oaths, and you're brought into the same curse and condemnation that they're under. Beware, my friends, repentance is part of the gospel, but it's way more deeper than just your fleshly sins. It's about your spiritual whoredom, and this right here is what I've been talking about the whole time with this Foolmasonry stuff. It's vain philosophy and just lies. If it was the truth, they wouldn't have any secrets. They'd be wanting to teach everybody openly and plainly about what Foolmasonry teaches, so they could make everybody such better men. But the fact is, they just make one into a twofold child of hell. That's what the Bible says. Here, let's look. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you compass sea and land to make one proselyte, and when he is made, ye make him twofold more the child of hell than yourselves.
Matthew chapter 23, verse 15. And Hebrews chapter 12 would also refer to them as bastards, receiving not any chastisement.
So try to remember what it is. Matthew 5, verses 33 through 37, listen what Jesus said. Again, ye have heard that it hath been said by them of old time, thou shalt not forswear thyself, but shalt perform unto the Lord thine oaths. But I say unto you, swear not at all. This is Jesus talking. Swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, neither by the earth, for it is his footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Neither shalt thou swear by thy head, because thou canst not make one hair white or black. But let your communication be yea, yea, nay, nay. For whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil. Jesus said, if you swear by anything, it's not of God. It's of evil. That alone ought to let a Christian Mason know he has no authority from God, no right to swear an oath, especially in abuse of his own body, but neither should he swear any other oath. What is the religion then of Freemasonry? Well, we already have established it is religious, and Albert Mackey and Albert Pike have both told us it's not Christian. So what is the religion of Freemasonry? Well, here's some quotes by Manly P. Hall. Now, I've already told you a couple of weeks ago, Manly Hall is probably the most upfront with his readers about the occultic influence in Freemasonry. When I say occultic, I mean exactly what you think I mean by occultic. The word literally means hidden, but when he's using the word occultic, or when I'm using it in this sense, he's talking about the dark things. Witchcraft, Wicca, the ancient pagan mystery religions. Listen to what Manly P. Hall says about the religion of Freemasonry. Preston, Gold, Mackey, Oliver, and Pike, in fact, nearly every great historian of Freemasonry, have all admitted the possibility of the modern society, that is the modern Freemason society, being connected, indirectly at least, with the ancient mysteries. And their descriptions of the modern society are prefaced by excerpts from ancient writings descriptive of primitive ceremonials. These eminent Masonic scholars have all recognized in the legend of Hiram Abiff an adaptation of the Osiris myth. It's a resurrection story of the pagan god Osiris. Nor do they deny that the major part of the symbolism of the craft is derived from the pagan institutions of antiquity, when the gods were venerated in secret places with strange figures and appropriate rituals. What he just said is that in spite of what the average Mason is going to tell you, the rituals of Freemasonry have nothing to do with the story of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. Now, the few Masons I've had that have actually tried to tell me that their rituals are religious almost invariably tell me they're centered around the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. But they're not. They're all centered around this mythological story of the death and resurrection of the king of Tyre, Hiram Abiff, that we talked about 2 weeks ago. And Manly P. Hall is saying the story of Hiram Abiff is not a retelling or a recreation of the story of Jesus. It's a retelling of the ancient pagan mythology of Osiris, the Egyptian god who was supposedly resurrected from the dead. By the way, there are those who will try to tell you Jesus is just a creation of the first century by those who were mimicking the religion of the worship of Osiris. Nothing could be further from the truth. If you want to know how that all works together and where the Osiris myth came from, you can go back and listen to the study we did on Mystery Babylon. He goes on to say, though, they did not realize that the that the mysteries whose rituals Freemasonry perpetuates were the custodians of a secret philosophy of life of such transcendent nature that it can only be entrusted to an individual tested and proved beyond all peradventure of human frailty. In other words, only Masons are qualified to receive this special knowledge. Look what he says. From the far places of Iraq and the hidden retreats of the Sufi mystics, those are Muslims, by the way, the ancient wisdom thus found its way into Europe. Well, how did those ancient religions find their way into Europe? Through the lodges of Freemasonry. Now look at the last quote, the last part of this quote on the board here. What was Baphomet, the goat of Mendez, whose mysteries they, the Knights Templar, were declared to have celebrated? All these are questions worthy of the thoughtful consideration of every studious Mason. The Knights Templar were all arrested and executed after being rounded up for worshiping Baphomet. Who's Baphomet? Well, when we had that study on Mystery Babylon, I showed you some slides, some pictures of Baphomet. You've all seen him before, even if you weren't here for that study. Baphomet is that picture of Satan that's used in the occult, in witchcraft. It's usually a man's androgynous body. He has both male and female body parts. And he's sitting down, usually with his hands something like this. But instead of a man's head, it's a goat's head. You've seen a picture of a man's body with a goat's head and the long horns. That's what witchcraft, Wicca, all of those, that's how they picture the devil himself. It's nothing but witchcraft. Manly P. Hall just told you here that the Knights Templar, who are viewed by the Masons as some of the early Masons after the Crusades, that they had brought back from the quote-unquote Holy Land the mystery religions of ancient times and brought it back to Europe, and they were worshiping Baphomet. Now, Manly P. Hall is a lot more out in the open than some of the other Masonic writers, and yet he's considered the most authoritative Mason in the 20th century with his writings. And his books will be found at virtually any Masonic hall that you visit. More about the religion of Freemasonry. Now, this is taken from the ceremony of the 26th degree of the Scottish Rite, and this 26th degree is called the Prince of Mercy degree of Freemasonry. Now, these are direct quotes from the ritual as it's supposed to be read and performed in the Masonic Lodge as the initiate is earning his 26th degree. In the early days of Christianity, there was an initiation like those of the pagans. Behold, the darkness is past, and the true light now shineth. My brother, you have before this been brought to light in Masonry. When the worshipful master, with the aid of the brethren, first made you a Mason, you have been taught to believe in the true God. You have passed through degrees intended to remind you of the Essenian and Hebrew mysteries. And in this you have heard described those practiced by the first Christians. As you were not required to profess a belief in the tenets of the Essenes or the Pharisees, so neither here are you required to believe in the divine mission or character of Jesus the Nazarene. We shadow forth the secret discipline of the early Christians, as we do other mysteries, as the diverse and often eccentric forms in which Masonry has developed itself in the different ages of the world. Masonically, we know not whether you be Christian, Jew, or Muslim. Now, before I continue on here, this part of the ceremony that is read as the initiate is receiving his degree in the 26th degree of Scottish Rite Freemasonry, Again, we're reminded that the Masons say you were brought to light by Masonry. Now, if there is a Christian who is going through this process, something ought to click upstairs saying, wait a minute, hold on. This is totally antithetical to what the Bible teaches. The Word of God is the light, not Freemasonry. And if I was a Christian when I came to the lodge in the first place, I was not living in darkness. I was already brought to light by Jesus Christ.
If you really were a Christian, you'd know that you already have the light and that you are walking in the light. If somebody is trying to tell you to swear that you're in darkness, you'd know not to do that. That's just straight denying the faith of Jesus Christ. So this is also where we hit a crossroads that I don't believe in once saved, always saved. I believe a person can throw away that salvation. I don't believe they lose it like a set of car keys. I don't believe they forfeit it or fall from it. But that's not what this video is about. But Revelation chapter 22 and verse 19 clearly says, "And if any man shall take away from the words of the book of this prophecy, God shall take away his part out of the book of life, and out of the holy city, and from the things which are written in this book." And that right there squashes that whole argument right there. Any man. If they take away from the words of the prophecy of this book, God shall take away his part out of the book of life. And not everybody has their name written in the book of life. I'll prove that real quick for you in case you're confused about that. And all in Revelation chapter 13 verse 8, "And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world." Are not written in the book of life. And they're not blotted out, they were just never written at all. So you can be blotted out, or you can be not written at all. I have other videos on that topic. Just check out my YouTube channel, patrickthebaptist.com, and look at the playlist section there, and you'll see I got studies on salvation, why once saved, always saved is false. Praying 1, 2, 3 after me doesn't save you either. You don't stop drinking beer to get saved though, so that's not what repentance actually means. But I got a lot of videos on that topic. This is already a long subject as to why Foolmasonry is contrary to the gospel. We're just going to leave it at that on this video. It's contrary to the gospel. You can't be a Christian and a Foolmason. There's nothing free about it. I don't really like calling it Freemason because it's not free. It costs a lot of money to play that game for one thing. And it sure doesn't make you free, so you can be a bond mason, something like that. But there's no wisdom in it, so I'm not actually calling people literal fools. I'm just talking about the philosophy. It'll make a fool out of you.
It is Jesus and his word that are the light. Freemasonry did not bring me out of darkness into light, but the Lord Jesus Christ brought me out of darkness into light. They also go on to say here, however, that they have initiated him into the mysteries of the Essenian and Hebrew mysteries. That just goes back to the Kabbalah that we talked about last week. Jewish mysticism that is not biblical. But then he goes on to say that we didn't require you to believe in all the things of the Essenes or the Pharisees. And we also don't require that you believe in the divine mission or character of Jesus. Well, wait a minute. You can't be a Christian unless you believe in the divine mission and character of Jesus. As I preached last Sunday morning here at Pinnacle Baptist Church, you can't even be saved if you don't believe in the deity of Christ. That he is God manifest in the flesh, as John said in chapter 1. But the Masons say you don't have to believe Jesus is God. You don't have to believe he was on a divine mission from the Father. No, you don't have to believe those things. You can be Christian, Jew, or Muslim, and you don't have to accept Jesus as the Messiah. That's what he's saying. Let's continue, though, with the ceremony. While you were veiled in darkness, you heard repeated by the voice of the great past its most ancient doctrines. No one has the right to object if the Christian Mason sees foreshadowed in Krishna and Sosos, in Mithras and Osiris, the divine word that, as he believes, became man and died upon the cross to redeem a fallen race. Nor can he object if others see in the word that was in the beginning with God and that was God only the logos of Plato and Philo, or the uttered thought or first emanation of light, or the reason of the great, silent, uncreated deity believed in and adored by all. Again, Masonry saying, as a Christian Mason, we wouldn't fault you if you believe that Jesus is also the same as Krishna to the Hindus, Mithras to the ancient Persians, Osiris to the Egyptians. We wouldn't fault you if you believe Jesus is just another name for that same God. But wait a minute. I would fault them. God certainly would fault them if they believe that. He also goes on to say, nor can you object if others say that he was nothing but these other emanations, iterations of God, that Jesus is not who the Bible says. You're free to believe anything about Jesus you care to believe. He continues, we do not undervalue the importance of any truth. We utter no word that can be deemed irreverent by anyone of any faith. We do not tell the Muslim that it is only important for him to believe that there is but one God, and wholly unessential whether Muhammad was his prophet. We do not tell the Hebrew that the Messiah, whom he expects, was born in Bethlehem nearly 2,000 years ago. And as little do we tell the Christian that Jesus the Nazarene was but a man, or his history the revival of an older legend. To do either is beyond our jurisdiction. Masonry of no one age belongs to all time. Of no one religion, it finds its great truths in all. When we break this down and look at what it's saying, it is the most blasphemous thing that a Christian could utter. We don't tell the Hebrew that the Messiah whom he expects was born in Bethlehem nearly 2,000 years ago. If we're not willing to say that, then we're not doing what the Bible tells us to do. The Muslim must hear us say, he is the God, the only way, the truth, and the life. The Jew needs to hear that. The Hindu needs to hear that. But the most blasphemous part of it all is the part that's in bold here on the screen. As little do we tell the Christian that Jesus the Nazarene was but a man, or his history the revival of an older legend. The Masons are saying, listen, Jesus is just a reinvention of the old Osiris myth of resurrection. And they just changed the name to Jesus and redid the Osiris story. I'm sorry, but that's blasphemous. The Osiris story is the one that is false. The Osiris story is the one that is untrue. The one about Jesus is the truth. And as a Christian, for me to say or accept that Jesus is just a retelling of the Osiris myth, that's the height of blasphemy. If I truly believe that, I cannot be a Christian. And any Christian who would say those things is under the judgment of God for having done so. The last part of it, my brother, the colors of this degree are green, red, and white. They symbolize the Masonic trinity. Well, they do recognize a trinity. It just ain't the trinity of the Bible. Look what it says. The green is an emblem of the infinite wisdom. The red of the supreme energy, force, or power. And the white produced by mingling all the colors of the divine harmony. In other words, they believe in a trinity, but it's more like the Star Wars religion than it is the religion of the Bible. Wisdom, the force, and harmony. Sounds like a lot of New Age stuff that we see and hear in pop culture all around us today. But what does the Bible say about the one true and living God? I'm not going to read all the verses because you know them and I've got to move on for time's sake. But the Bible makes it clear that the God of the Bible is the only true and living God. There are no others. Please go back and read these when you have time. If you need them, I'll send them to you. Jesus in Freemasonry. Well, we've already seen some of what Freemasonry says about Jesus. Let's read some more what it says about Jesus. Jesus is not God, but is portrayed as a human with errors and imperfections. Oh, preacher, they wouldn't say that about Jesus. Well, let's see for ourselves. This is from Albert Pike, who wrote Morals and Dogma, which is considered, as I told you, the quote-unquote Bible of Freemasonry. He says, quote, divine or human, inspired or only a reforming Essene, it must be agreed that his teachings are far nobler, far purer, far less allayed with error and imperfections, far less of the earthly than those of Socrates, Plato, Seneca, or Muhammad, or any of the great moralists and reformers of the world. So Albert Pike says, I'll have to say this about Jesus. He was better than all those others. But notice he says he had fewer errors and imperfections. He didn't say he was without errors and imperfections. He just had fewer than the others. That made him a little better than they are. I'm sorry, that's not the Jesus that I worship. The Jesus that I worship is the true and living God manifest in the flesh. He was without sin, which is why he was able to pay for my sin and for yours. Here's another thing they say about Jesus. In all the Masonic mythology, Jesus is replaced as the Redeemer of mankind by Hiram, the king of Tyre, Hiram Abiff. In their story, they tell in the first 3 degrees of the Blue Lodge. Listen to what is written, published in the Kentucky Monitor. It says, quote, all antiquity believed in a future life to be attained by purification and trials in a state or successive states of reward and punishment. That sounds like Hinduism and reincarnation to me, but let's continue on. And in the mediator or redeemer by whom the evil principle was to be overcome and the supreme deity reconciled to his creatures. The belief was general that he was to be born of a virgin and suffer a painful death. By the way, all the ancient pagan mystery religions also believed that the coming Redeemer would be born of a virgin and suffer a sacrificial death. But it's because Satan has a counterfeit for God's plan of redemption, not the other way around. Let's continue on. The Hindus called him Krishna, the Chinese Kuntse, the Persians Sosiosh, the Chaldeans Duvani, the Egyptians Horus, Plato Love, the Scandinavians Balder, the Christians Jesus, the Masons call him Hiram. There you have it in black and white. The Masonic Lodge teaches that Jesus is the same person, the same story as all of these others. They're all equal. They're all the same retelling of the same story, of the same character. And the Masons call him Hiram, not Jesus. I'm sorry, but Hiram is not my Redeemer. Neither is Krishna, neither is Balder, neither is Duvani or Horus or any of the others. The Jesus of the Bible. Know them. He's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Jesus is God in the flesh. He's not a reiteration of anybody else's mythology. Did you know the Freemasons talk about Masons being born again? No, not being born again as a Christian, but being born again in the lodge. Wait a minute. As a Christian, I am born again, but it had nothing to do with the Masonic Lodge. I did not get born again in the Masonic Lodge. I've never been in a Masonic Lodge, at least during one of their ceremonies, but I am definitely born again. What do they mean by born again? If they've already told us they're not Christian, what do they mean by being born again as a Mason? Well, let's see. Becoming a Mason brings about the, quote, new birth. Here's from the Kentucky Monitor, pages 26 and 27. Your reception within the lodge is your introduction into the life of Masonry. It is a symbol of the agonies of the first death and the throes of a new birth. Skip on down to the next bold there. You come inquiringly to our doors, seeking the new birth. Masonry is telling the lie that people come to Freemasonry to get born again. You do not go to the Masonic Lodge, dear friend, to get born again. If you go there to get born again, you'll leave as unborn again as you were when you arrived at the door. Freemasonry and the Lodge have replaced the local New Testament church in the eyes of Masons. This too, taken from the Kentucky Monitor and also the Tennessee Craftsman, both Masonic publications. Quote, "No institution was ever established on nobler principles, nor was ever more excellent rules and maxims laid down than are inculcated in the several Masonic lectures." Now, I'm sorry, but the Masonic Lodge is not the institution God gave the authority to present the truth, the gospel, and the new birth. That's to the New Testament church. Here's what the Bible says about the new birth. Go read John chapter 3. I don't have time to go through it. I'm almost to the end for tonight. So is Freemasonry not a religious institution? I mean, do they not practice religious ceremonies? Everything we just saw was a religious ceremony of sorts, with religious words, religious practices, and yet they say they're not Christian. They're at least honest about that, but it is a religion. The exact rituals may vary slightly from lodge to lodge, but during his initiation into the first degree of the Blue Lodge, that is when he first becomes a Mason, a man may expect something like this. Now, I'm going to read this, and I'm going to try to act it out a little bit up front as I'm doing this. This is the process a man goes through when he first comes to the lodge to become a Mason. This is his induction ceremony to become an entered apprentice into Freemasonry. Knocking at the door from inside the anteroom, that is the vestibule area, he knocks at the door going into the inner chamber of the Masonic Lodge, and the initiate will be greeted with a question at the door. What do you seek? His answer is to be, I seek light. Again, for the Christian, he ought to already have light. To say that he's seeking light from any source other than Jesus is an abominable thing for a Christian to say. That ought to be the place at which any Christian stops and says, whoa, hold on, I can't go any further. But let's continue on. Upon opening the door to allow the initiate into the inner chamber, the deacon, that's what he's called in the Masonic Lodge, says, you have come to us having lived a life in complete darkness, but now seek to walk in the light. I don't have any light on the light I already have. But before he opens the door to lead the initiate into that inner chamber, he's going to have several things done to him. First of all, he's going to have a blindfold put on or a hood pulled down over his head so that he cannot see anything from this point on. When they put that hood over his head, that's what is called being hoodwinked. You've all heard the phrase being hoodwinked. Most of the time, if you're hoodwinked, it means you've been tricked into something, deceived into something. Well, that's what in Masonic lodges is called being hoodwinked. When you have the hood put on you, you can't see anything from this point on in the ceremony, and they're going to lead you blindfolded now without you being able to see what's going on. You're left to wonder what is around me because I can't see what's going on around me. The initiate is instructed to either unbutton his shirt and reveal his left breast, or remove his shirt entirely, or in some lodges, completely undressed down to his boxers. He then has a sword or dagger or some other sharp instrument pressed against his left breast, right here at his heart, and is instructed as to the seriousness of the vows and obligations that he is about to make. In other words, they stick something against his chest that's sharp, poke him, and say, what you're about to do is serious. A short ritual is enacted which includes the initiate. And he is eventually told to kneel, still with the hood on, still with the blindfold on, to kneel in front of the Masonic altar on which sits the three great lights of Masonry, the compass, the square, and whichever holy book is used in that particular lodge. Kneeling in front of this altar with his hands underneath and on top of the book, and facing the worshipful master of the lodge who sits or stands in the east, the initiate then takes his oath and makes his solemn obligations. You've already heard some of the oaths that we've already read tonight. So now, what can a Christian make of a ritual where he's obligated to say that he has lived his entire life in darkness, even as a Christian? That he has come to the Masonic lodge as the source of true light? When he is asked to commit to vows which are unbiblical at best and blasphemous at worst? When he is asked to kneel at an altar other than the one at his own local church? When he takes his vows intentionally facing the east and kneeling underneath a ceiling that's usually adorned with the sun, moon, stars, and signs of the zodiac? When he receives his instructions from a man who he is to call worshipful master? What can you make of that but a religious institution, but overtly not Christian? Freemasonry is a religion with religious exercises. It does the things of a religion. Earning one's way to heaven. In Albert Mackey's Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, he states, quote, "All Masons unite in declaring it to be a system of morality, by the practice of which its members may advance their spiritual interest and mount by the theological ladder from the lodge on earth to the lodge in heaven." In other words, you can earn your way to heaven by your good works. Is that not what every other man-made religion teaches? Salvation by works. The Apostle Paul said something different though, didn't he? Ephesians 2:8 and 9, "For by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast." All right, I'm right here almost at the very end for tonight. Man can become God. Although many do not know it, Mormonism and Masonry have much in common. Mainly because Joseph Smith stole much of the rites and rituals of the lodge to incorporate into his new religion he was creating in upstate New York in the 1800s. Even the temple garments worn by Mormons today, pictured on the right, bear the square and compass images on them symbolically. Mormonism teaches that every man can become the god of his own world, just as they say Adam did in the Mormon church, and Elohim, God the Father, before him. Masonry also teaches that man may become God. Listen to this taken from the Royal Arch degree in Scottish Rite Freemasonry. The following exchange takes place. "Brother Inspector, what are you?" And he is to reply, "I am that I am." I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to be the man saying, "I am that I am," speaking of myself. I'd be looking for the lightning bolt coming down at any moment. But that's what he is required to say in the ceremony. Any man ascribing God's name for himself is not only ridiculous, but also blasphemous. One of the many occultic phrases used in the writings and rituals of Freemasonry is, quote, "As above, so below. As below, so above." This phrase is taken from the 1908 book, The Kabbalah, which purports to be a translation of ancient writings of Hermeticism, which is just another name for Satanism, which was bound up in the mystery religions of ancient times. But similarly, one of the mantras of Mormonism, even today, is, quote, "As man is now, God once was. As God now is, man may be." It's not difficult to see the relationship between Mormon theology and the teachings of Freemasonry. And by the way, you may not know this, but Joseph Smith was chased out of upstate New York by the Masons, not because he was practicing polygamy, but because he was taking all their secrets and putting them into his new religion and initiating people with their secret rites and rituals that weren't Masons. and the Masons ran him out of the state and were going to kill him. He ran for his life, ended up in Nauvoo, Illinois, and set up his whole little settlement there with his followers, and eventually was dragged out of a jail cell and executed on the spot by a mob, which many believe, though it is not publicly stated, that they were Masons who came and killed him for still doing the same thing there in Nauvoo, Illinois, giving away all the secrets of Freemasonry to these Mormons that many of them weren't even Masons. Look what Annie Besant said. She was a theosophist with Madame Blavatsky and a co-Mason. Man is not to be compelled. He is to be free. He is not a slave, but a God in the making. That sounds like Shirley MacLaine with her out on a limb New Age religion. Find the God within you. Man is God in the making. Manly P. Hall said, man is a God in the making. And as in the mystic myths of Egypt, on the potter's wheel he is being molded, made into a God. But what does the Bible say? Isaiah 45, 5 through 7, I am the Lord. There is none else. There is no God beside me. I girded thee, though thou hast not known me, that they may know from the rising of the sun and from the west that there is none beside me. I am the Lord, and there is none else. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. In case there's any misunderstanding, there is no other God, our God says. This is my last slide of the night. The Order of Melchizedek. During the initiation of the 19th degree of Scottish Rite Freemasonry, the initiate receives the degree of Grand Pontiff, which, by the way, is the same title the Pope carries. During the ritual, he's anointed with oil on his head and told, quote, be thou a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. But wait a minute, who does the Bible say is a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek? It's not Aaron, it's not Moses, it's not any of the priests of the Old Testament, it wasn't the high priest in Jesus' day. The book of Hebrews says that it is Jesus, the Son of God. Melchizedek in the Old Testament.
Well, I got to interrupt here because I'm not going to let him call the Lord a human. That's wicked. The Lord Jesus actually was Melchizedek in a man's body. There's no pre-incarnate picture or nothing. You go and read all through the book of Hebrews. It clearly expounds that there could be nobody else but Jesus that could meet the requirement of Melchizedek. Without father, without mother, I mean, that's alone is enough. I'm going to have to do another study on that. Look in the description. I'll include it on this video once I've got it posted. And we'll do a full study on Melchizedek sometime here real soon. Lord help me.
But the book of Hebrews tells us who it is who is qualified to be a priest after the order of Melchizedek. It is only Jesus, who has neither father nor mother, neither beginning nor end. Jesus is the priest after the order of Melchizedek. No man was qualified to be a priest after the order of Melchizedek. The book of Hebrews says that from beginning to end. This is describing again to men the right to become God, which is totally foreign to the Bible. Now, we've seen tonight that Freemasonry practices a religion, but it is not Christian. Next week, Lord willing, is our final installment of this series. What you're going to see next week are the things that even most Masons don't even know. When you see and hear the things that are said next week, it's going to shock you.
Thanks for watching this video. I know it's a long one. Originally, the man that preached this sermon did a 5-part series. We've ended here with part number 3. Hopefully in the next week or two, I'll get through the other two parts and get that part 2 posted on here. I'm going to say that I would not recommend listening to this preacher. While he tells you that oath swearing's wrong and all, he is proud of the flag and his oath unto it. He needs to repent and believe the Bible the rest of the way. Just picking on Masons about oath swearing and what the Bible said. I mean, it goes all around. We can't be swearing to nothing. Can't be affirming, you can't pledge, or any of these other things, because it's like the Bible said, what cometh more than these is of evil. And I don't believe the Bible is just a book of suggestions or jokes. I mean, it's straight commandments from God. It's easy to be saved from these things if you just abstain from them like the Bible says, don't get entrapped in them. The American flag is a Masonic symbol, and the oath to it was brought to us by Masons and Knights of Columbus members, as I explained earlier in the video. So you definitely need to repent of that and quit swearing unto it, because one last thing on that. About the flag, the U.S. flag code actually clearly states, no part of the flag should ever be used as a costume or athletic uniform. However, a flag patch may be affixed to the uniform of military personnel, firemen, policemen, and members of patriotic organizations. The flag represents a living country and itself considered a living thing. Look there. They consider a filthy cloth to be a living thing. Therefore, the lapel flag pin, being a replica, should be worn on the left lapel near the heart. Yeah, I guess that's because that's what you live for, is a dirty cloth. Let's look at something else. In Revelation chapter 13, verse 15, we read, And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. So they're saying that the cloth is a living thing, just like it says here in Revelation chapter 13. It says that life was given unto the image of the beast. So what's going on there? I mean, what's it giving life to? A lot of people say how they serve that cloth, and they're ready to die for it and kill for it. And there's a lot of people, especially that are in the military, that would really love to kill a person just for disrespecting their little cloth god that they call Old Glory. Yeah, the world commonly calls this flag Old Glory and swears unto it and the unknown god in which it stands. Explain to me how that's actually Christian. I mean, we see the Apostle Paul do that, bring an image of Caesar up in there, and everybody swore to that. They didn't swear to anything. Jesus clearly said not to. And in James, he said above all else. So, you do what you're going to do. But the Bible says not to. And that's going to be the end of this video. I love you guys. Thanks for your time. And check out the other videos on my channel. They're all categorized. And I pray that the Lord Jesus Christ richly bless and guide you and your families. Carefully consider all that you've heard here. And above all that, just study your Bible. I mean, just throw out everything else, all these other books, anything you're reading on the internet. Just study the Bible and let the Spirit of Truth do what God promised He would.